Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 28 years old. This happened in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of northern New Mexico, where the wilderness consumes everything, even time. I've always been drawn to places that feel untouched by humanity, places where cell service dies and the only sounds are wind through pine needles and your own heartbeat. That's why I chose the remote trails near Wheeler Peak for my solo backpacking trip, a week away from civilization to clear my head after my bitter divorce from Mark. 6 months of courtroom battles and asset divisions had left me hollow, and I needed the mountains to fill that emptiness. The first signs that something was wrong came on day 2. I'd set up camp near a small alpine lake, probably about 11,000 feet in elevation. The air was thin but clean, carrying that distinct pine scent that never quite leaves your clothes even after washing. As dusk approached, I noticed movement at the tree line, just a flicker, like heat rising from pavement. I squinted, trying to make out what it might be. A deer, maybe? But no deer moves quite like that, with jerky, almost mechanical motions. "Hello," I called, immediately regretting breaking the silence. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the vastness around me. No response, just the gentle lapping of water against the shoreline and the whisper of wind through the pines. I shook it off, blaming altitude sickness or fatigue. I still had enough daylight to gather firewood, so I ventured into the forest, never straying far from camp. The trees grew denser as I walked, their branches interlocking above me like gnarled fingers. I had the strangest feeling of being watched, that crawling sensation on the back of your neck that makes your skin prickle. Just wildlife, I muttered to myself, gathering fallen branches. You're in their territory now. When I returned to camp, something felt different. My tent was exactly where I'd left it, my backpack untouched, but something had changed. It took me a moment to realize what it was. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves or distant animal calls. Just a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to press against my eardrums. I built my fire with trembling hands, the crack of breaking branches sounding obscenely loud in the stillness. As flames licked upward, I noticed they didn't look quite right. Instead of warm orange and yellow, they burned with a bluish tinge at the edges. I told myself it was just the type of wood, or minerals in the soil affecting the color, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. Night fell quickly in the mountains, darkness swallowing everything beyond the small circle of firelight. I huddled closer to the flames, watching shadows dance across my tent. The silence persisted, broken only by the occasional pop from the fire. Then I heard it, a whisper, so faint I might have imagined it. "Emily." My head snapped up, eyes searching the darkness beyond my camp. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time, trying to mask my fear with authority. Nothing. I must have fallen asleep by the fire because I awoke with a start, the embers barely glowing. The moon hung overhead, casting silver light across the lake's surface, and there, at the water's edge, stood a figure. My breath caught in my throat. It appeared to be a woman, her back to me, long dark hair hanging limply down her back. She wore what looked like a simple white dress, though in the moonlight everything appeared colorless. "Hello," I called, my voice cracking. Are you okay? Are you lost?" The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. She just stood there, impossibly still, staring out at the water. I should have stayed by the fire. I should have crawled into my tent and zipped it up tight, pretending I'd seen nothing. But curiosity, that damned human trait that's gotten so many of us killed, pushed me to my feet. "Excuse me?" I tried again, taking a tentative step forward. The figure turned, so slowly it seemed deliberate. Even now, I struggle to describe what I saw. It had a woman's shape, yes, but her face, where eyes should have been, were just empty, dark hollows. Her mouth hung open, too wide for any human jaw, a black void stretching downward. I froze, unable to scream, unable to run. My body betrayed me completely as terror locked every joint in place. The thing, I refuse to call it a woman, tilted its head at an impossible angle as if curious. Then it smiled, revealing teeth like jagged obsidian shards. "Emily," it whispered again, its voice like dry leaves scraping across stone. "You shouldn't be here." My survival instinct finally kicked in. I scrambled backward, nearly falling as I rushed to my tent. I zipped myself inside, knowing full well how laughable that protection was. Thin nylon wouldn't save me from whatever stood by the lake. I fumbled for my flashlight, my knife, anything that might help. The rest of that night was the longest of my life. I lay trembling in my sleeping bag, straining to hear any sound of approach. Sometimes I thought I heard soft footsteps circling my tent. Other times, whispers just beyond the fabric, too quiet to make out words, but unmistakably there. Dawn broke with agonizing slowness. When sunlight finally filtered through the tent walls, I emerged cautiously, knife in hand. The campsite looked undisturbed. No footprints marred the lakeshore. I might have convinced myself it was all a nightmare if not for one chilling detail. A small pile of black stones arranged in a perfect circle where I'd seen the figure standing. I should have left immediately, hiked back to civilization and never looked back. That would have been the rational response. Instead, I decided it had been a hallucination from altitude sickness or exhaustion. I'd press on with my planned route, which would take me deeper into the wilderness toward Horseshoe Lake, then loop back around in 3 days. I broke camp quickly, eager to put distance between myself and that lake. The hiking helped calm my nerves, the physical exertion forcing my mind to focus on my body rather than the previous night's terror. The trail climbed steadily, switchbacking up a ridge that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. On a normal day, I would have stopped to photograph the landscape. Instead, I pushed forward, checking my GPS frequently to ensure I stayed on course. Around midday, I noticed my GPS was acting strangely. The screen flickered, coordinates jumping erratically before settling again. I tapped it against my palm, assuming it was just a glitch. When I looked up from the device, I realized with growing unease that the trail ahead didn't match my map. Where there should have been a clear path continuing along the ridge, the trail instead veered sharply downward into a dense stand of pines I didn't remember seeing earlier. I checked my compass, at least that was working normally, and confirmed I was heading in the right general direction. Maybe there had been a trail reroute that wasn't reflected on my map yet. I followed the new path cautiously. The forest grew denser, the trees pressing closer together until they blocked most of the sunlight. The temperature dropped noticeably, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The silence from the previous night had returned. No birds called from the branches above. No squirrels or chipmunks rustled through the underbrush. Just my footsteps and breathing disturbing the unnatural quiet. The trail began to feel less like a hiking path and more like a tunnel through the woods, the trees forming walls on either side. I checked my GPS again, completely dead now, despite fresh batteries. My phone showed no service as expected, but its compass app still worked. According to it, I was heading northeast, which matched my intended direction. After another hour of hiking, the trees suddenly opened into a small clearing. In the center stood a cabin I hadn't seen on any map. It was old, but not abandoned, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. A small garden plot to one side contained what looked like herbs and vegetables, though something about their appearance seemed off. The colors too vibrant, the shapes slightly wrong. Curiosity warred with caution. On one hand, finding another person out here might help me get my bearings. On the other, something about this place felt wrong, like finding a perfectly made bed in the middle of a forest. Before I could decide whether to approach or slip back into the woods, the cabin door opened. An elderly woman emerged, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple dress that looked handmade, and her deeply lined face broke into a smile when she saw me. "Well, hello there, traveler," she called, her voice surprisingly strong. "Don't often get visitors this far up the mountain." "Hi," I replied cautiously. "I think I might be a bit lost. The trail seems to have changed from my map." She chuckled, the sound not quite reaching her eyes, which remained fixed on me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "The mountains have their own ways," she said cryptically. "Trails change, maps lie. Come in and rest a while. I've stew on the fire." Everything about this scenario screamed danger, but the rational part of my brain argued that an elderly woman living alone in the woods was unlikely to be a threat. Besides, I needed directions, and storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. "I'd appreciate that," I said, approaching slowly. "I'm Emily." "Agnes," she replied simply, turning back toward the cabin. "Come along before the rain starts." The interior of the cabin was exactly what you'd expect, rustic, with handmade furniture and bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. A pot bubbled over a wood stove, filling the single room with a savory aroma that made my stomach growl despite my apprehension. Agnes gestured to a chair at a small table. "Sit, eat, then we'll figure out where you need to go." I removed my backpack but kept it close along with my hiking poles. Agnes ladled stew into a wooden bowl and placed it before me along with a chunk of dark bread. It looked and smelled delicious, but something held me back. "It's venison," she said, noting my hesitation. "From a buck I got last season. Nothing to fear." To be polite, I took a small bite. The flavor exploded on my tongue, rich, complex, and utterly delicious. Soon I was eating eagerly, my hunger overcoming my caution. As I ate, Agnes studied me with those unnerving eyes. "What brings you to these parts alone, girl? These mountains aren't kind to solitary travelers." I swallowed before answering. Just needed to clear my head. "Divorce." Agnes nodded knowingly. "Men," she said with a hint of bitterness, "they take and take until there's nothing left." "Something like that," I agreed, uncomfortable with how accurately she'd read the situation. "And now you're lost," she continued, "though perhaps not in the way you think." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What do you mean?" Agnes smiled again, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous and sharp for her mouth. "The Sangre de Cristo has many secrets, many spirits. They're drawn to pain, to emptiness." She leaned closer. "To people like you, Emily." My spoon clattered against the bowl. "How do you know my name? I don't remember telling you." Her smile widened. "Didn't you? Memory plays tricks in these mountains." Thunder rumbled outside, and rain began to patter against the cabin's roof. I stood abruptly, knocking my chair backward. "I should go. I need to make more miles before dark." "In this weather?" Agnes gestured to the window where rain now fell in sheets. "Foolishness. Stay. At least until the storm passes." Logic told me she was right. Hiking in a thunderstorm, especially at elevation, was dangerous. But every instinct screamed that staying was far more dangerous. "I have rain gear," I insisted, grabbing my backpack. "Thank you for the meal, but I really need to go." Agnes's expression hardened. "The woman at the lake sent you to me, didn't she?" My blood turned to ice. "What woman?" "The one with no eyes," Agnes said matter-of-factly. "Carlita. She finds them, I keep them. That's our arrangement." I backed toward the door, fumbling behind me for the handle. Agnes remained seated, watching me with those penetrating eyes that now seemed to glow with an inner light. "You can't leave," she said softly. "Not now that you've eaten my food." My stomach cramped violently and I doubled over in pain. The stew. Of course, it was the stew. "What did you do to me?" I gasped. Agnes rose slowly, no longer the frail old woman she'd appeared to be. She stood straighter, taller, her movements fluid and predatory. "Just a little something to make you sleep," she said, approaching me. "When you wake, you'll be ready for the binding." I fumbled for my hiking poles, extending one with a click. When Agnes reached for me, I swung it with all my strength, catching her across the face. She shrieked, a sound no human throat could make, and reeled backward. I didn't wait to see more. I yanked the door open and plunged into the storm, rain immediately soaking through my clothes. Behind me, Agnes's inhuman scream rose above the thunder, promising retribution. I ran blindly through the forest, stomach still cramping, vision beginning to blur. Whatever she'd put in the food was working quickly. I needed to find shelter, somewhere to hide until the effects wore off. The trees whipped past as I stumbled downhill, hoping to put distance between myself and the cabin. My foot caught on an exposed root, and I tumbled forward, rolling down a steep embankment. Pain exploded in my shoulder as I came to rest against the base of a massive pine. The world spun around me, trees melting into each other as consciousness began to slip away. Through my fading vision, I saw a small opening in the hillside nearby, a cave or hollow large enough to crawl into. With the last of my strength, I dragged myself inside, pulling my backpack in after me. Darkness claimed me before I could even assess my shelter. I awoke to absolute darkness, my mouth dry as cotton, head pounding mercilessly. How long had I been unconscious? Hours? A day? My watch had a luminous face, but when I checked it, the hands had stopped at 3:17. Carefully, I felt around my shelter. It was indeed a small cave, barely tall enough to sit up in, extending perhaps 10 feet into the hillside. The air felt stale, but not dangerously so. I fumbled through my backpack for my flashlight, relieved when it clicked on, casting harsh light around my temporary refuge. The beam revealed something that made my breath catch: crude drawings on the cave walls. Stick figures rendered in what looked horribly like dried blood, depicting scenes of hunt and sacrifice. One figure appeared in many drawings, a tall woman with antlers growing from her head. I switched off the flashlight immediately, preferring darkness to those images. My shoulder throbbed where I'd hit the tree, but nothing felt broken. The cramping in my stomach had subsided, though nausea remained. Whatever Agnes had drugged me with seemed to be wearing off. I needed a plan. My GPS was dead. My phone useless except as a compass. I had no idea where I was in relation to the main trail. The safest option seemed to be finding higher ground, getting my bearings, and heading west. Eventually, I'd hit the main road that circled the wilderness area. I listened carefully before venturing out. The storm had passed, leaving behind that same unnatural silence from before. No birds, no insects, no rustle of leaves despite the slight breeze I felt on my face. Daylight had returned, though the heavy cloud cover made it impossible to determine the time. I shouldered my pack, wincing at my injuries, and began climbing back up the embankment I'd fallen down. At the top, I oriented myself using my phone's compass and began heading west. The forest seemed different now, the trees spaced farther apart, their bark darker, almost black in places. Had I wandered into a section affected by an old forest fire? After about an hour of steady hiking, I emerged onto a ridge that offered a view of the surrounding landscape. What I saw made no sense. Where there should have been mountains stretching northward, instead there was an endless sea of mist, thick and impenetrable. To the south, the forest continued, but the trees were wrong, massive, ancient-looking conifers that didn't match the typical flora of the Sangre de Cristo range. Most disturbing of all, I could see no signs of civilization. No distant roads, no cleared areas, nothing to indicate human presence besides myself. "This isn't possible," I whispered, my voice sounding small and insignificant against the vastness before me. "But it is," came a voice behind me. I whirled around, nearly losing my balance on the ridge. A man stood there, perhaps 10 feet away. He looked normal enough at first glance. Early 30s, dressed in hiking gear not unlike my own, with a short beard and friendly eyes. But something about him felt off, like a photograph that's been subtly altered. "Who are you?" I demanded, gripping my hiking pole tightly. "Martin," he said simply. "And you're in trouble, Emily." Again, that chill of hearing my name from a stranger's lips. "How do you know who I am?" He smiled sadly. "Everyone knows who you are now. You ate Agnes's food. You're marked." "What does that mean? Where am I?" Panic edged my voice. Martin gestured to the landscape around us. "You're still in the Sangre de Cristo, but not the mountains, you know. You've crossed over into the older places, the spaces between." He took a step toward me and I raised my pole defensively. He stopped, hands raised placatingly. "I'm like you," he said. "Or I was. Got lost 3 years ago during a hunting trip. Took Agnes's hospitality." He pulled down the collar of his shirt, revealing an intricate scar on his collarbone, a symbol like an antlered figure surrounded by smaller marks. "She marked me, but I got away before the binding was complete. Now I'm trapped here, neither fully in their world nor ours." "Their world?" I repeated, trying to process what he was saying. "You mean, like, another dimension?" Martin shrugged. "Call it what you want. The old people who lived here had names for it. The Shadowlands, the hunting grounds, place where spirits dwell when they're not tormenting the living. Spirits like Carlita, the woman at the lake." He nodded grimly. "Carlita Sanchez. Drowned herself in that lake in 1879 after her lover abandoned her. Now she lures people to Agnes. And Agnes is something old, something that was here before people. The Spanish called her La Bruja del Bosque, the witch of the forest. The natives left offerings to keep her appeased." Martin's eyes darted nervously to the forest around us. "We shouldn't stay in one place too long. They can feel us when we do." Despite my skepticism, this had to be some elaborate hallucination from the drugs, right? I found myself following as Martin led the way along the ridge. He moved with the confidence of someone familiar with the terrain, occasionally pausing to listen or examine marks on trees that I couldn't decipher. "Where are we going?" I asked after we'd been walking for about 20 minutes. "There's a place where the boundary is thin," he explained without slowing. "A doorway of sorts. With the right timing, you might be able to cross back." "What about you?" He glanced back, that sad smile returning. "Too late for me. Been here too long. Started to become part of this place." He pushed up his sleeve, revealing forearm skin that had a strange texture, almost like bark. "But you're still new, still connected to your world." The implications were too horrifying to contemplate. Instead, I focused on practical matters. "How far is this doorway?" "About half a day's hike. We need to reach it by sunset." We continued in silence for a while, the landscape growing increasingly bizarre. Trees twisted into impossible shapes. Flowers bloomed in colors that hurt to look at directly. Once, I saw what appeared to be a deer watching us from between trees, but its proportions were wrong, its antlers too elaborate, its eyes glowing faintly. "Don't look directly at anything living," Martin warned. "They take it as a challenge." As we hiked, Martin explained more about this place and its rules. Iron repelled the spirits but wouldn't work on Agnes. Running water could provide temporary protection. Dawn and dusk were when the boundaries between worlds were thinnest, making passage possible but also making the spirits more active. "How do you survive here?" I asked as we paused to drink from our water bottles. "Carefully," he replied. "There are others like me. We formed a sort of community. Help each other, trade information and supplies. A community of lost hikers? And hunters, campers, even a park ranger who disappeared in '97. He capped his water bottle. "We manage, but it's no way to live. That's why I'm helping you get out while you still can." We crested another ridge around mid-afternoon, and Martin pointed to a valley below. In its center stood a perfect circle of standing stones, perhaps 30 feet in diameter. "The doorway," he said. built by the same people who made the cave drawings you found." I stared at him in surprise. "How did you know about the cave?" He tapped his temple. "They know everything that happens here, and I've been connected to this place long enough to hear some of its whispers." The descent into the valley was treacherous, the slope steep and covered with loose scree. By the time we reached the stone circle, the sun was sinking toward the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Martin led me to the center of the circle, where a flat stone altar stood. Its surface was stained dark with what I desperately hoped wasn't blood. "Now we wait," he said, checking the position of the sun. "When it touches the mountain peak, that's when you need to go." I shifted nervously, eyeing the altar. "Go where, exactly?" "Through." He pointed to the space between two particularly tall standing stones on the western edge of the circle. "Focus on your world, on something anchoring you there. A person, a place. Let it pull you across." The sun continued its descent, shadows lengthening across the valley floor. As it neared the mountaintop, I noticed movement among the trees surrounding the stone circle. Shapes flitting between trunks, too quick to identify clearly. "They're coming," Martin said tensely. "They always do at crossing times. Whatever happens, don't stop. Don't look back." "What about you?" I asked again. He shook his head. "I told you, too late for me." He pulled something from his pocket, a small iron knife, and pressed it into my hand. "Take this, just in case." The sun touched the mountain peak, and a change came over the stone circle. The air between the western stones began to shimmer, like heat rising from pavement. Through it, I could almost make out a normal forest. No twisted trees or impossible colors. "Now," Martin urged, pushing me toward the shimmer. "Go!" I hesitated only briefly before lunging toward the opening. Behind me, I heard movement. Many bodies rushing forward from the forest edge. Martin's shout of defiance, a scream that might have been his or something else entirely. The shimmering air enveloped me, feeling like static electricity against my skin. For a moment, I was caught between, seeing both the stone circle behind me and a normal forest path ahead. Martin stood with his back to me, arms spread wide as dark figures converged on him. Then the image rippled and vanished, replaced by solid reality. I stumbled forward onto a recognizable hiking trail, falling to my knees on packed dirt. Around me, birds chirped and insects buzzed. Normal forest sounds that nearly brought me to tears after the unnatural silence of the other place. My GPS chirped as it reacquired satellites. My phone showed 1 bar of service. According to both devices, I was on the main trail about 5 miles from the trailhead where I'd parked my car nearly a week ago. In my hand, I still clutched Martin's iron knife, proof that what I'd experienced wasn't just some elaborate hallucination. I tucked it carefully into my pack and began hiking toward civilization, forcing myself not to run despite the overwhelming urge to flee. It took me less than 2 hours to reach my car. I drove straight to the nearest ranger station where I reported finding the knife on the trail. I couldn't bring myself to tell the full story, knowing how it would sound. The ranger examined it with interest, noting its antique appearance. When I asked if anyone named Martin had gone missing in the area in recent years, he checked their records. "We had a Martin Blackwood disappear about 3 years ago," he confirmed, showing me a missing person report with a photo. The face that looked back at me was undeniably the man who had saved me, though healthier and without the haunted look in his eyes. Hunting trip. Never came back to his campsite. Search and rescue looked for weeks. I nodded mutely, throat tight with emotion. "Funny thing," the ranger continued, studying the knife. "His family said he carried an old iron knife that belonged to his grandfather. Family heirloom. Never found it or any of his gear." I left the station with a hollow feeling in my chest. I considered going to a hospital, having myself checked for drugs or toxins that might explain what I'd experienced. But the knife was real. Martin Blackwood was real. And deep down, I knew the truth. I've never returned to the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. I moved away from New Mexico entirely, settling in a crowded city where I'm never alone, never surrounded by too much silence. But sometimes in dreams, I find myself back in that other forest. I see Martin, now more tree than man, watching me from between twisted trunks. I see Agnes, her true form revealed, ancient and terrible, crowned with antlers that scrape the sky, and sometimes by still water, I glimpse a woman with hollow eyes, whispering my name. I wake from these dreams with the taste of Agnes's stew still on my tongue, and the certainty that a piece of me remains there, waiting for my return. The mountains have claimed a part of my soul, just as they claimed Martin and countless others before us. And I know, with bone-deep certainty, that one day they'll call me back to finish what began at that lake where no birds sing. My name is David Jones, and I am 34 years old. This happened in the remote wilderness of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in northern New Mexico, during what was supposed to be a rejuvenating hiking trip with my closest friends. We were a tight-knit group from the marketing department at Albuquerque's largest tech company. Myself, Nathan Boyce, Alicia Ramirez, and Tyler Edwards. After 6 months of grueling deadlines and midnight oil, our boss practically ordered us to take a long weekend away from our screens. Nathan, our self-appointed outdoorsman despite growing up in suburban Phoenix, suggested we explore the wilderness near Wheeler Peak. The highest point in New Mexico seemed like the perfect challenge and escape. None of us knew then that some heights aren't meant to be climbed, some trails aren't meant to be followed, and some entities in those ancient mountains have been waiting centuries for visitors like us. The drive from Albuquerque to Taos took us through landscapes that transformed from desert scrubland to alpine forests. As we ascended into the mountains, my cell signal grew increasingly spotty until it finally disappeared altogether. I remember joking about digital detox while secretly feeling a twinge of unease at being so disconnected. If only I'd recognized that warning for what it was. We reached the Williams Lake trailhead by mid-afternoon on Friday. The parking area was suspiciously empty for a pleasant September weekend, but Nathan assured us it was our good fortune. We'd have the wilderness to ourselves. The plan was straightforward: hike to Williams Lake, camp overnight, then ascend toward Wheeler Peak the following day, with the option to summit if we felt up to it. Alicia, always meticulous, had researched local legends during our drive. "Did you guys know this range's name means Blood of Christ?" she asked as we shouldered our packs. Spanish explorers thought the alpenglow on the peaks looked like blood, but the locals have other stories about why these mountains earned that name. Tyler rolled his eyes. "Please don't start with ghost stories before we even hit the trail." "I'm just saying," Alicia continued, unfazed. "The Pueblo people considered certain parts of these mountains sacred and forbidden, places where the veil between worlds was thin. That's why we have Nathan," I chimed in, trying to lighten the mood, "our human repellent for ghosts and bears alike." Nathan flexed dramatically. "Fear not, colleagues. I've watched every episode of Survivorman twice." We laughed, but our voices seemed swallowed by the dense pines surrounding the trailhead. The forest was unnervingly silent. No birdsong, no rustling leaves despite the breeze I could feel on my face. The hike to Williams Lake started pleasantly enough. The trail wound through aspen groves whose leaves had just begun their autumn transformation, creating a canopy of gold above us. We walked single file, Nathan leading, then Alicia, myself, and Tyler bringing up the rear. The physical exertion felt good after months behind a desk, and for a while, work stress melted away with each step deeper into the wilderness. About an hour in, something changed. I couldn't immediately identify what was different, but a heaviness settled over our group. Conversation died. Each of us seemed lost in our own thoughts, as though the forest itself was pressing down on our minds. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Tyler finally asked, breaking the silence. "It's just wilderness anxiety," Nathan replied without turning around. "Happens to city folks when there's no concrete under their feet." But I felt it too. a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the uncomfortable feeling of eyes tracking our movement through the trees. I scanned the forest repeatedly, but saw nothing beyond endless trunks and shadows. We reached Williams Lake by late afternoon. In other circumstances, I would have called the setting idyllic. The crystal-clear alpine lake reflected the surrounding peaks perfectly, and a small clearing near the shore offered an ideal campsite. But that sensation of being observed hadn't diminished. If anything, it had intensified. As Nathan and I set up the tents, Alicia arranged a fire pit using stones from around the lake shore. Tyler wandered off to gather firewood from the nearby forest edge, disappearing between the dark trunks. "We should keep track of time," Alicia said suddenly. "Tyler shouldn't be gone more than 15 minutes. I checked my watch, but the face was blank, completely dead, despite having changed the battery the week before. Nathan and Alicia discovered their phones had drained as well, despite being fully charged at the trailhead. "That's weird," Nathan muttered, tapping futilely at his black screen. "Must be the cold." But it wasn't particularly cold yet. The September afternoon was crisp but comfortable. Before we could dwell on this anomaly, Tyler emerged from the trees with an armload of branches. His expression stopped my breath, pale, eyes wide, movements mechanical. "Find enough wood?" I called, trying to sound casual. Tyler looked at me without seeming to truly focus. "Yes," he said after a pause that lasted several seconds too long. "More than enough." He deposited the wood beside our half-built fire pit and stood motionless, staring at the lake. "Tyler?" Alicia approached him cautiously. "You okay?" "I heard singing," he said flatly. "In the woods. A woman singing." He turned to us with an unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Beautiful voice. I wanted to follow it." Nathan forced a laugh. "Dude, there's nobody else out here." "I know what I heard," Tyler insisted, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard from him before. "She was calling my name." An uncomfortable silence fell over our camp. I busied myself with tent stakes while Nathan coaxed the fire to life. Tyler remained unnaturally still, occasionally turning his head as though listening for something beyond our hearing. As darkness descended, we huddled around the fire, which seemed to burn with unusual dimness despite Nathan's attentions. The flames occasionally flared an odd greenish-blue color that none of us commented on but all noticed, exchanging nervous glances across the pit. "Perhaps we should share some stories," Alicia suggested, clearly trying to restore normalcy. "David, didn't you grow up near here?" "About 100 miles south," I corrected, "but my grandfather was from Taos. He used to tell me about a witch who lived in these mountains, La Vieja Solitaria, the solitary old woman. According to him, she'd been banished from her village centuries ago for practicing dark magic. Instead of dying in the wilderness, she made a pact with something ancient in these peaks. People who encountered her would appear days or weeks later, physically unharmed but changed somehow." I immediately regretted sharing this childhood ghost story as I watched Tyler's face transform, first with intense interest, then with an expression of disturbing recognition. "What did she look like in the stories?" he asked, leaning forward. I hesitated. "Just an old woman, I guess, dressed in tattered clothes with long white hair." Tyler's face drained of color. "That's who I saw in the forest. Not just heard, saw, between the trees, watching me." She smiled. Nathan stood abruptly. "Okay, enough ghost stories. We have a tough hike tomorrow. Let's get some sleep." Though nobody said it aloud, we all silently agreed to pair up in the tents rather than follow our original sleeping arrangements. I joined Nathan, while Alicia reluctantly shared with Tyler, whose odd behavior had us all on edge. Inside our tent, Nathan whispered, "Tyler's freaking me out. Has he ever acted like this before?" I shook my head in the darkness. "Never. Should we head back tomorrow instead of continuing up?" "Let's see how he is in the morning," Nathan decided. Probably just altitude sickness messing with his head. We fell into uneasy silence. Despite my exhaustion, sleep evaded me. The forest outside our thin nylon shelter seemed alive with whispers just below the threshold of comprehension. Hours passed as I stared at the tent ceiling, my heart racing each time a twig snapped or the wind sighed through the pines. Around what must have been midnight, I heard the unmistakable sound of a zipper, someone exiting a tent. I held my breath, listening. Soft footsteps padded away from camp. After a moment's hesitation, I carefully extracted myself from my sleeping bag, trying not to wake Nathan, who had finally begun snoring. Outside, the night was lit by a moon so bright it cast sharp shadows across our campsite. The fire had died to embers. I saw immediately that the other tent's entrance flap hung open. Moving toward it, I whispered, "Alicia, Tyler." Alicia's frightened face appeared in the opening. "Tyler's gone," she hissed. I dozed off, and when I woke up, he wasn't here. I thought he went to pee, but it's been at least 20 minutes. My stomach clenched with dread. "Which direction did he go?" She pointed toward the densest section of forest, away from the trail and lake. I heard him mumbling something about singing. I should have woken Nathan. I should have stayed with Alicia. I shouldn't have entered those woods alone. But concern for Tyler overrode my growing fear, so I grabbed my headlamp and followed his tracks, clearly visible in the soft forest floor. The moment I passed beyond the first line of trees, the moonlight vanished as though severed, plunging me into absolute darkness relieved only by my headlamp's beam. The prickling sensation of being watched intensified to almost physical pain. My breathing sounded thunderous in the unnatural silence. Tyler's tracks led me deeper into the forest, moving with unsettling purpose in a straight line that ignored obstacles a normal hiker would avoid. I called his name softly, then with increasing volume, but received no response. After about 10 minutes of increasingly panicked pursuit, the trees opened into a small clearing I would have sworn wasn't on any map of the area. At its center stood an impossibly ancient cedar tree, its massive trunk twisted like a body in agony, and beneath it, Tyler stood with his back to me, head tilted as though listening. "Tyler," I called, relief flooding through me. "Man, you scared the hell out of us. What are you doing out here?" He turned slowly and the beam of my headlamp caught his face. I stumbled backward with a choked cry. Tyler's eyes were completely black, like holes in his face, and his mouth hung open in a silent scream or laugh. I couldn't tell which. But worse than his expression was what stood behind him. I caught only glimpses. A tall, emaciated figure with skin like dried parchment stretched over protruding bones, long white hair that moved against the breeze, a face both ancient and ageless, with a smile that split it too wide to be human. As my light passed over it, the figure shrank back into the shadows of the cedar tree, but not before I saw its eyes, milky white and fixed directly on me. "She's been so lonely," Tyler said, his voice oddly layered as though multiple people spoke through him. "For centuries, David. But now we've come to visit. Now she'll never be alone again." He took a step toward me. "She wants to meet you too." Terror paralyzed me for crucial seconds before survival instinct kicked in. I turned and ran, crashing through underbrush, tripping over roots, my headlamp beam bouncing wildly through the trees. Behind me came sounds no human throat should make, high, singing notes interspersed with guttural growls. I don't know how I found my way back to camp. The forest seemed to shift around me, paths appearing and disappearing, familiar landmarks suddenly in impossible places. When I finally burst into our campsite, I found Nathan and Alicia awake, frantically calling Tyler's and my names. "We need to leave," I gasped, doubling over to catch my breath. "Now! Something's wrong with Tyler. Something's out there." "What are you talking about?" Nathan demanded. "What happened to Tyler?" Between gasping breaths, I tried to explain what I'd seen. Even as the words left my mouth, I heard how unhinged they sounded. A witch, possession, Tyler's black eyes. Nathan looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but Alicia's face had gone white with recognition. La vieja solitaria, she whispered. The legends say she can only leave her territory if she's invited, or if she can possess a physical form. This is insane, Nathan protested. Tyler probably just got disoriented. We need to find him, not run away because of some campfire story. You didn't see his eyes, I insisted. That wasn't Tyler anymore. Our argument was cut short by a sound that froze my blood. Tyler's voice, calling from the forest edge. Guys, I got a little lost. Can someone shine a light? Nathan immediately grabbed his flashlight, pointing it toward the voice. Alicia clutched my arm with trembling fingers. Don't, I whispered urgently. That's not him. But Nathan was already moving toward the trees, his light revealing Tyler standing just beyond the clearing, smiling broadly. He looked normal, the Tyler I'd known for years, except for one detail that made my heart stop. His feet were hovering several inches above the ground. Nathan hadn't noticed this impossibility yet. Tyler, man, you had us worried. David came back with some crazy story about me. Tyler's smile widened unnaturally, stretching beyond the confines of a human face. Did he tell you about the old woman who's lived in these mountains since before your ancestors came with their crosses and guns? Did he tell you she's been so very lonely? Nathan's flashlight beam wavered as he finally registered something was terribly wrong. He backed away slowly as Tyler, or the thing wearing Tyler's shape, drifted forward into our campsite. We should run, Tyler said in that layered voice, like little rabbits. It's more enjoyable when they run. I don't know which of us moved first, but suddenly we were all grabbing essential gear, headlamps, water bottles, jackets, and sprinting toward the trail. Behind us, Tyler's laughter echoed, multiplying until it seemed to come from every direction at once. Impossibly, his voice surrounded us, ahead and behind simultaneously. You can't outrun her, the voices chorused. These are her mountains, her hunting grounds. We reached the trail and ran downhill, headlamp beams bouncing wildly, each of us gasping for breath in the thin alpine air. The trail that had taken us hours to ascend became a gauntlet of hidden roots and loose stones as we fled in darkness. Twice I fell hard, scraping my palms and knees, but terror drove me back to my feet instantly. We had been running for perhaps 15 minutes when Alicia screamed. I spun around to see her pointing at a figure on the trail ahead, the old woman standing directly in our path. In the combined glare of our headlamps, she seemed more substantial than the glimpse I'd caught earlier. Her tattered dress might once have been white but was now stained with substances I didn't want to identify. Her face was a nightmare of deep wrinkles and malevolent intelligence, those milky eyes somehow still tracking our every movement. "Different direction," Nathan shouted, veering off the trail into the forest. Alicia and I followed without hesitation, plunging into undergrowth that tore at our clothes and skin. What followed was a nightmare of disorientation and growing panic. The forest seemed to continuously shift around us, landmarks appearing and disappearing, the ground itself changing elevation without warning. Sometimes we'd spot the trail, only to find it led in circles or back to the same clearing multiple times. Our headlamps began to flicker and dim despite fresh batteries. The temperature plummeted until our breath clouded before us, though it had been a mild September night minutes earlier. And always, just at the edge of perception, we heard Tyler's voice singing an eerie melody that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Occasionally, we caught glimpses of him floating between trees or the old woman standing motionless, watching our increasingly desperate flight with detached amusement. After what felt like hours, we stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin in a clearing that hadn't been visible moments before. Its windows were dark, empty sockets, its door hanging from a single rusted hinge. Under normal circumstances, nothing could have convinced me to enter such an ominous structure, but we were beyond rational fear at this point. "In there," Nathan gasped, pulling us toward the cabin. "We can barricade the door. The cabin's interior smelled of mold and decay, its single room containing nothing but a rusted iron bed frame, a broken table, and a stone fireplace with ancient ashes. Nathan and I shoved the table against the hanging door while Alicia searched desperately for anything we could use as a weapon. "Has anyone's phone come back to life?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "There has to be a way out of this," Nathan insisted, though his voice had lost its usual confidence. "Hallucinations from toxic mushroom spores, altitude sickness, something rational." Alicia had gone very still, staring at the cabin walls. "Guys," she whispered, "look." In the beam of her headlamp, I saw what had captured her attention. The cabin's interior walls were covered with carvings, hundreds of names and dates spanning centuries, the earliest inscribed in Spanish, the most recent dated just 6 months earlier. As I scanned the horrifying record, I realized what unified these markings. They were all epitaphs. Miguel Sanchez, 1842, taken by the Bruja. John Williams, 1903, She Wears My Face Now. Hector Martinez, 1967, Run While You Still Can. Susan Blackwood, 2024, She Comes in Dreams Now. A soft knock at the door silenced our panicked discussion. Then Tyler's voice, perfectly normal, frightened, human, called out, "Guys, please let me in. I don't know what happened, but I'm scared. Something's out here with me." Alicia made an involuntary move toward the door, but I grabbed her arm. "It's not him," I hissed. "Remember, his feet weren't touching the ground." "David, please." Tyler's voice broke with a sob that sounded heart-wrenchingly genuine. "It's really me. I woke up alone in the forest. I don't remember anything after collecting firewood. Please don't leave me out here with her." Nathan looked at me, conflict clear on his face. "What if it really is him?" "It's not," I insisted, though doubt gnawed at me. What if I was wrong? What if the real Tyler was out there and we were abandoning him? The knocking became more insistent. "I can see your lights. I know you're in there. Please, I'm begging you. She's coming." My resolve wavered as I heard the naked terror in my friend's voice. I took a step toward the door, but Alicia blocked my path. "Wait," she whispered, pointing to the window. Outside, Tyler stood in the moonlight, one hand raised to knock again. His expression was a mask of fear and desperation. But below his knees, his legs gradually dissolved into mist, with no feet touching the earth. And behind him, partially hidden by shadows, stood the tall, gaunt figure of the old woman, one skeletal hand resting possessively on Tyler's shoulder. As we watched in horrified silence, Tyler's pleading expression melted away, replaced by that inhuman smile. "Almost had you," he said in that layered voice. "The lonely woman thought you might open the door for your friend. She's been using that trick for centuries." He tilted his head. "No matter. This shelter won't protect you. Nothing built by human hands can keep her out of her own domain." As if to emphasize this point, the temperature inside the cabin plunged dramatically. Our breath emerged as dense white clouds and frost began forming on the interior walls, creeping across the carved names like a living thing seeking to highlight each desperate warning. The old woman moved forward, passing partially through Tyler's misty form. Up close, through the window, I could see her more clearly, the unnaturally elongated limbs, fingers ending in talon-like nails, that too-wide smile revealing teeth filed to sharp points. She pressed one hand flat against the cabin's outer wall, and the entire structure groaned in response. "We need a plan," Nathan whispered urgently. "We can't just wait for them to get in." "The names on the wall," Alicia said suddenly. "Some of them survived to write their stories. There must be a way out." I scanned the carvings desperately, looking for any that might offer advice rather than just warnings. Near the fireplace, partially hidden by shadow, I spotted an inscription different from the others. Not a name, but what appeared to be instructions. "La Vieja cannot cross running water under moonlight. Follow the creek east to the Red Bridge. Do not look back." "There," I pointed. "We need to find a creek." I saw water through the trees about 50 yards from here, Nathan said. "But how do we get past them?" Outside, Tyler's possessed form continued to circle the cabin while the old woman remained by the window, her milky eyes fixed on us with predatory patience. The frost had now covered most of the interior walls and was spreading across the floor toward our feet. "I'll create a distraction," Nathan said finally. "You two find that creek and follow it east." Alicia grabbed his arm. "That's suicide." "We don't all have to die here," he insisted. "I was the one who brought us to these mountains. This is on me." Before either of us could stop him, Nathan had shoved the table aside and burst through the door, sprinting in the opposite direction from where he'd spotted the water. Tyler's possessed form immediately gave chase, floating above the ground with unnatural speed. The old woman hesitated, looking between the fleeing Nathan and us, before gliding after Tyler with that eerie, floating movement. "Now!" I pulled Alicia out the door, and we ran in the direction Nathan had indicated. I tried to block out the sounds behind us. Nathan's shouts suddenly cut short, followed by a triumphant howl that contained nothing human. We found the creek exactly where Nathan had described, a narrow, swift-running ribbon of water gleaming silver in the moonlight. Without hesitation, we splashed into the freezing current, nearly losing our footing on the slippery rocks. "East," Alicia gasped, pointing downstream. "We need to go east." We waded through the knee-deep water as quickly as we could, using our dimming headlamps to avoid the deeper pools and jagged rocks. Behind us, sounds of pursuit grew louder, breaking branches, that eerie singing, and occasionally, Nathan's voice calling for help in ways that made it clear it wasn't really him anymore. The terrain grew steeper as we followed the creek. Exhaustion pulled at my limbs, and the freezing water had numbed my feet to the point where each step was an act of faith. Alicia stumbled repeatedly, and I caught her arm, keeping her upright through sheer determination. "Keep going," I urged. "The inscription mentioned a red bridge. It can't be much farther." "David," Alicia's voice was tight with terror. "Look." On the creek bank, keeping pace with us but not entering the water, walked the old woman. Her expression was one of cold fury, those filed teeth bared in a snarl. Behind her floated both Tyler and Nathan now, their forms partially transparent in the moonlight, faces locked in expressions of eternal horror. "Don't look at them," I said, forcing my gaze ahead. "Keep moving." The creek widened as we descended, the current growing stronger. Just as my strength was failing, the moonlight illuminated a structure ahead. A small wooden bridge painted a faded red, spanning the creek perhaps 100 yards downstream. "There," I pointed, "that must be it." As we approached the bridge, the old woman's fury became a palpable force. She paced the bank like a caged predator, occasionally reaching toward us only to withdraw her hand with a hiss when it neared the water's surface. The ghostly forms of Tyler and Nathan wailed in those layered voices, begging us to join them, promising an end to fear and cold if we'd just step out of the creek. The red bridge looked ancient and fragile, its wooden planks warped with age. As we drew closer, I could make out symbols carved into its support posts, protective sigils of some kind, their meaning lost to time, but their power apparently intact. "Almost there," I encouraged Alicia, who was shivering uncontrollably, her lips blue with cold. "Just a little farther." 20 yards from the bridge, Alicia slipped on a submerged rock and fell heavily, disappearing beneath the water's surface for a heart-stopping moment before I hauled her up. She emerged, gasping, her headlamp extinguished. "I can't," she choked. "I can't feel my legs anymore. David." On the bank, the old woman smiled in triumph. She gestured to the ghostly forms of our friends who moved closer to the water's edge, their arms outstretched invitingly. "You're so tired," Tyler's voice cooed. "Just step onto the bank for a moment. Rest your weary legs." "Don't listen," I commanded, half dragging, half carrying Alicia toward the bridge. "They're not our friends anymore." The old woman shrieked in frustration as we staggered the final yards to the bridge. I pushed Alicia ahead of me onto the first weathered plank. The moment her foot touched the wood, the ghostly figures on the bank contorted in pain, their forms stretching and distorting as though pulled by invisible forces. We crawled across the bridge on hands and knees, too exhausted to stand. Behind us, the old woman reached the edge of the creek, stretching one skeletal hand toward us, stopping precisely at the invisible boundary created by the running water and moonlight. As we reached the bridge's midpoint, a change came over the night. The unnatural silence of the forest broke, replaced by normal nocturnal sounds, an owl's distant call, the rustle of small animals in underbrush. The paralyzing sense of dread lifted like a physical weight from my shoulders. When I looked back, the bank was empty. No sign of the old woman or the possessed forms of our friends. Beyond the bridge, the creek flowed into a more populated valley. Lights from distant cabins winked through the trees, and the faint sound of a vehicle on a highway carried through the clear air. We had escaped La Vieja Solitaria's domain. We were found the next morning by a Forest Service ranger responding to a report of screams in the wilderness. Hypothermic, dehydrated, and incoherent, we were transported to the hospital in Taos, where we spent 2 days recovering. When we were coherent enough to explain what had happened, search parties were dispatched to locate Nathan and Tyler. They found our abandoned campsite at Williams Lake, undisturbed except for 4 sets of footprints leading in different directions into the forest. Despite an extensive week-long search involving dogs and helicopters, no trace of Nathan or Tyler was ever discovered. The cabin we had sheltered in couldn't be located, though several search team members reported feeling inexplicably uneasy in certain sections of the forest. 3 months later, a hiker reported seeing 2 men matching Nathan and Tyler's descriptions standing motionless among the trees near Williams Lake, their feet hovering above the ground, watching him with completely black eyes. By the time authorities investigated, there was nothing to find except an unseasonably cold patch of forest where frost covered the ground despite the summer heat. Alicia and I have never returned to the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. We both left our jobs at the tech company, unable to explain to our colleagues what really happened to Nathan and Tyler. The official report lists them as missing, presumed dead from exposure or animal attack. But on cold nights when the wind sighs through the trees outside my window, I sometimes hear Tyler's voice singing that eerie melody. And in my dreams, I see the old woman, La Vieja Solitaria, watching me with those milky eyes, her too wide smile promising that one day I'll return to her mountains. One day I'll join my friends in her eternal company. Because the most terrifying truth is this: I'm not entirely convinced we ever truly escaped. Sometimes I catch Alicia staring at me with an odd expression, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. And sometimes, when I pass a mirror, I glimpse something ancient and hungry looking back from behind my eyes, just for an instant before it slips away into the darkness. My name is David Jones and I am 34 years old. This happened in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of New Mexico, but I fear it isn't over yet. My name is Jessica Davis, and I am 32 years old. This happened in the Gila National Forest, New Mexico, last summer when what was supposed to be a healing journey turned into something I still can't fully explain. After my divorce finalized, I needed space away from everything familiar. The walls of my Albuquerque apartment had started closing in, each room haunted by memories of arguments and tearful confrontations with my ex-husband. My therapist suggested reconnecting with nature, something I hadn't done since childhood camping trips with my father. The Gila Wilderness called to me from travel blogs, New Mexico's oldest wilderness area. Over 500,000 acres of rugged mountains, deep canyons, and ancient cliff dwellings. Perfect isolation. I wasn't an experienced hiker by any means, but I'd always been reasonably athletic. At the REI in Santa Fe, I purchased everything the eager salesperson recommended: a lightweight tent, sleeping bag rated for unexpected temperature drops, hiking boots, water purification tablets, trail mix, freeze-dried meals, a satellite phone for emergencies, and bear spray. I also brought my companion, a 4-year-old border collie mix named Luna, who had been my emotional support throughout the divorce. Luna was the only one who stayed with me during those long nights when tears soaked my pillow. The drive from Albuquerque took about 4 hours, winding through increasingly sparse settlements until I reached the trailhead near the Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument. I planned to hike the West Fork Trail, eventually making my way to Jordan Hot Springs, a natural hot spring that many hikers claimed had healing properties, just what I needed to wash away the past year's pain. A park ranger at the visitor center eyed my new gear skeptically when I checked in. "Hiking alone?" she asked, her weathered face creasing with concern. When I nodded, she handed me a detailed map and circled several landmarks. "Stay on the marked trails," she warned. "People who wander off sometimes don't find their way back. Cell service is non-existent out there. Your satellite phone is your lifeline." She hesitated before adding, "And be careful near the old mining areas. There've been some strange reports lately." I dismissed her concern as the usual warning to tourists. I failed to ask what she meant by strange reports. That negligence would haunt me. Luna seemed unusually restless as we began our hike, tugging at her leash and whining at shadows between the ponderosa pines. The West Fork Trail followed a creek that cut through the canyon, the sound of rushing water a constant companion. The first few miles were peaceful, the September air crisp and invigorating, golden aspens shimmering against the deep green of the forest. The trail was moderately difficult, climbing steadily alongside the creek, occasionally crossing it on slippery stones. By late afternoon, I'd covered about 6 miles and decided to make camp at a small clearing near the water. Luna circled the perimeter restlessly as I set up my tent, her usual playfulness replaced by vigilant attention to the darkening forest. I attributed her behavior to the unfamiliar surroundings and wildlife sense. As the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, I built a small fire and heated one of my freeze-dried meals, some unappetizing pasta concoction that tasted like salted cardboard. Luna refused her kibble, instead sitting alert, her ears perked toward the darkness beyond our camp. "What is it, girl?" I asked, following her gaze. The forest appeared still, but something felt off. Like when you enter a room and sense someone has been there moments before. I shrugged it off as city-dweller paranoia and focused on enjoying the stars emerging overhead, brilliant and numerous in the clear mountain air. That night I dreamed of being watched. In my nightmare, eyes peered from between trees. Not animal eyes, but human ones, bloodshot and unblinking. I woke with a start around 3 a.m. to Luna's low growling. She stood at the tent entrance, hackles raised. "It's okay," I whispered, pulling her close. "Probably just a deer." But Luna wasn't convinced, and honestly, neither was I. We both lay awake until dawn broke through the canyon, painting the tent walls with amber light. I packed up early, eager to reach Jordan Hot Springs by midday. The trail grew more challenging, zigzagging up steep inclines before plunging down into shadowed ravines. About 2 hours into our hike, I noticed Luna kept looking behind us, sometimes stopping completely to stare back down the trail. Around noon, we paused at a stunning overlook. The canyon stretched before us, its walls striped with red and orange sediment, the creek a silver ribbon far below. I snapped several photos, then checked the map. According to my calculations, we were only about 3 miles from the hot springs. That's when I first heard it, a faint, melodic humming. It sounded like a woman singing, but the notes were strange, discordant. I scanned the area but saw no one. "Hello?" I called. Only my echo answered. The humming stopped immediately. Luna whimpered, pressing against my legs. I scratched behind her ears reassuringly, though my own heart had accelerated. "Let's keep moving," I murmured. The trail narrowed as we descended into a densely wooded area. The trees here seemed older, their trunks massive and gnarled, branches intertwining overhead to block much of the sunlight. The air felt heavier, stagnant. The sound of the creek grew louder, but I could no longer see it through the undergrowth. We'd been hiking for another hour when I realized something was wrong. According to my map, we should have reached Jordan Hot Springs already. I stopped to get my bearings, pulling out my compass. It spun wildly, never settling on a direction. I tried my satellite phone, nothing but static. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered, studying the map again. Luna whined, tugging urgently at her leash in the direction we'd come from. That's when I noticed the silence. The forest had gone completely quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The only sound was the distant rush of water, which now seemed to come from all directions at once. "We're fine," I said aloud, more to comfort myself than Luna. "We just took a wrong turn." I decided to backtrack to the last landmark I recognized, a distinctive rock formation shaped like a thumb. We turned around and walked for what felt like half an hour, but the landscape had somehow changed. None of the trees or rock formations looked familiar. By late afternoon, I was forced to admit we were lost. The map no longer seemed to correspond to our surroundings, and my compass remained useless. My phone showed no service, as expected, but more alarmingly, my satellite phone still produced nothing but static, punctuated occasionally by what sounded like distant laughter. The sun was setting when we stumbled upon a small clearing with the remains of an old campfire. Relief washed over me. Other hikers had been here. Maybe they were nearby. I called out again, louder this time. My voice echoed back, distorted. I set up camp, hands shaking slightly as I assembled the tent. Luna refused to settle, pacing the clearing's perimeter and growling softly at the encroaching darkness. I couldn't blame her. Every shadow seemed to shift when viewed directly, like something was constantly moving just out of sight. After another tasteless freeze-dried meal that I barely touched, I retreated into my tent with Luna. The night sounds began slowly. Normal at first, the hoot of an owl rustling in the underbrush. But then came that humming again, closer now, moving around our campsite. I zipped the tent completely closed and held Luna tight, her body trembling against mine. "It's just another hiker," I whispered, "or the wind playing tricks." The humming circled our tent twice before stopping directly outside. Luna buried her head under my sleeping bag, whimpering. I held my breath, eyes fixed on the tent wall where I imagined someone, or something, standing. Then came a voice, raspy and thin, speaking in what sounded like Spanish, but with words that made no sense to me. The voice paused as if waiting for a response, then continued in English. "Jessica, we've been waiting for you." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't told anyone my name. I hadn't seen another soul since the ranger at the trailhead. "Who's there?" I managed to call out, my voice embarrassingly feeble. Silence followed, then soft laughter, the same laughter I'd heard on the satellite phone. The tent wall bulged inward slightly, as if someone was pressing a finger against it. I fumbled for my bear spray, clutching it like a lifeline. The pressure disappeared. Footsteps circled again, then receded into the forest. I remained frozen, listening intently until exhaustion eventually pulled me into uneasy sleep. My dreams were vivid and terrifying. I was running through the forest, Luna ahead of me, but the trees kept shifting position, blocking our path. Behind us came that humming, always gaining. In the dream, I found the hot springs, but instead of clear water, they bubbled with thick, dark liquid. Floating in the center was a woman's pale face, her features identical to mine. I jolted awake at dawn, drenched in sweat despite the morning chill. Luna was already up, standing alert at the tent entrance. When I unzipped it, I discovered a circle of small stones around our tent that definitely hadn't been there the night before. Each stone was painted with a red symbol I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I packed up camp. Whatever was happening, we needed to find our way back to civilization. I abandoned my plan to reach the hot springs. Now, I just wanted out of these woods. We headed downhill, following the sound of the creek. Water flows downhill, and all waterways eventually lead to larger ones where people might be found. Basic wilderness survival knowledge. The morning air was thick with mist that clung to the trees, reducing visibility to about 20 feet in any direction. As we walked, I became aware of the movement in the peripheral edges of the mist, dark shapes that disappeared when I turned to look directly at them. Luna saw them too, her head swiveling constantly, low growls rumbling in her chest. By midday, the mist had burned off, but my sense of being followed intensified. Occasionally, I heard branches snap behind us, too heavy to be small wildlife. Several times I whirled around, convinced I'd catch whoever was stalking us, but the trail behind always appeared empty. We came upon an old mining entrance cut into the hillside, partially collapsed and marked with faded warning signs. The area around it was oddly barren. No plants grew within 30 feet of the entrance. Luna refused to go near it, bracing her legs and pulling in the opposite direction. Something metallic glinted near the mine's entrance. Cautiously, I approached, discovering a small tarnished locket half buried in the dirt. When I picked it up and clicked it open, my stomach dropped. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman who looked eerily like me, dressed in clothing from perhaps the 1930s. On the opposite side was engraved, "Jessica, mi amor eterno." I dropped the locket as if it had burned me. This was impossible. My name on a decades-old locket? The coincidence was too bizarre to be random. I backed away, tugging Luna with me when something moved in the darkness of the mine entrance. Just a shifting of shadows, but enough to send us sprinting down the trail. We ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to buckle. When we finally stopped in a small meadow bisected by the creek, I collapsed onto a fallen log, gasping for breath. Luna stood guard, her eyes fixed on the trail behind us. It was then I noticed the sky. Dark clouds had gathered with unnatural speed, and the air had taken on that charged quality that precedes a severe storm. I needed shelter. Fast. Rain in these canyons could cause flash floods, and hypothermia was a real danger at these elevations. Across the meadow, nestled against the tree line, stood a small cabin I hadn't noticed before. It looked weathered but intact, with smoke curling from its stone chimney. People. Help! I hurried toward it, relief washing over me. As we got closer, however, Luna began to resist, whining and pulling at her leash. The cabin, which had appeared welcoming from a distance, now seemed somehow wrong. Its proportions were slightly off. The windows too narrow, the door too tall and thin. No sound came from inside, not even movement, despite the fresh smoke. Desperation overrode my unease. The first fat raindrops were already falling as I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm a hiker, and I'm lost. Please, I need help." Still nothing. The door, I noticed, wasn't fully closed. It shifted slightly under my knocking. With a deep breath, I pushed it open. The cabin's interior was a single room, dimly lit by a dying fire in the hearth. A table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed, and various supplies lined the rough-hewn walls. But what made my skin crawl were the dozens of photographs pinned to every available surface. All women, all bearing a striking resemblance to me. Different clothing spanning decades, different hairstyles, but the same face, the same eyes. My eyes. In the center of the table sat an old leather-bound book, open to a page covered in spidery handwriting and those same red symbols I'd seen on the stones around my tent. Luna growled, her attention fixed on the dark corner behind the door. I turned slowly, already knowing something waited there. An ancient woman sat in a rocking chair I somehow hadn't noticed before. Her skin was deeply wrinkled, stretched too tight over prominent bones. Her eyes, milky with cataracts, still managed to fix on me with disturbing intensity. When she smiled, her teeth were stained dark red. "Te he estado esperando," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you." I backed toward the door, pulling Luna with me. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "La Bruja del Cañón," she replied. "The Canyon Witch, some call me, but you can call me Magdalena." She gestured toward the photographs. "You always do, before the end." "I don't understand." My back pressed against the cabin wall now. The door had somehow closed behind me, though I hadn't heard it. Magdalena rose from her chair with surprising fluidity for one who appeared so ancient. Every 50 years, she returns to me. Different name sometimes, different life, but always the same soul. She approached, one gnarled hand extended. "The one who stole my love, my Santiago." I shook my head. "You're confused. I've never been here before. I don't know any Santiago." "Not in this life, perhaps. But the soul remembers, even when the mind forgets." Her fingers brushed my cheek, ice cold and dry as parchment. "You took him from me in 1874. You led him to the mine, where the earth swallowed him. I've taken you back, each time you return. Your essence fuels my years." Luna snarled, lunging between us. Magdalena hissed, an inhuman sound that sent chills down my spine. With a flick of her wrist, she sent my dog flying across the room without touching her. Luna yelped as she hit the wall, then crumpled to the floor. "Luna!" I screamed, starting toward her. "She breathes still," Magdalena said dismissively. "Unlike Santiago, buried in darkness while you escaped, unlike the others." She gestured again to the photographs. They all thought they could escape too. I glanced toward Luna, who was struggling to her feet, seemingly dazed but alive. Relief flooded me, followed immediately by determination. Whatever delusion this woman suffered from, she was dangerous. I needed to get us both out of here. My bear spray was in my jacket pocket. I slipped my hand inside, fingers closing around the canister. "What do you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep her talking while I formulated an escape plan. Magdalena's milky eyes seemed to clear momentarily, revealing dark irises filled with hatred. "I want what was promised. Life for life. Soul for soul." She picked up a curved knife from the table, its blade inscribed with the same red symbols. "In the springs, your blood will restore me fully. 50 more years of life." Outside, thunder cracked so loudly the cabin shook. Rain pounded the roof like bullets. Magdalena approached, knife raised. "The storm keeps others away," she murmured. "No interruptions this time." As she lunged, I pulled out the bear spray and discharged it directly into her face. Magdalena shrieked, a sound no human throat should produce, clawing at her eyes. I sprinted to Luna, scooped her into my arms, and kicked open the cabin door. The storm outside was apocalyptic. Rain fell in sheets, turning the ground to mud that sucked at my boots. Lightning split the sky in continuous flashes, briefly illuminating a landscape transformed. Trees bent at impossible angles, their branches reaching like grasping hands. I ran blindly. Luna clutched to my chest, splashing through quickly forming puddles and sliding down muddy inclines. Behind us, Magdalena's screams transformed into that eerie humming, somehow audible even over the storm's fury. The creek had already swollen, water brown and angry, carrying debris. I followed its course downhill, praying it would lead to the main trail. Luna squirmed in my arms until I set her down, relieved to see her able to run alongside me. A fallen tree provided momentary shelter, allowing me to catch my breath and check my satellite phone. This time, instead of static, I heard a clear voice. "Jessica Davis, your location has been identified. Emergency services are en route to your coordinates. Please remain where you are." Hope surged through me. Somehow, despite everything, my distress signal had gotten through. All we had to do was survive until help arrived. That hope was short-lived. Through the curtain of rain, a figure approached. Magdalena, her face blistered from the bear spray, her clothing plastered to her skeletal frame. But most terrifying was her movement. She didn't walk, but glided inches above the flooded ground, the knife still clutched in her hand. Luna barked furiously, positioning herself between me and the approaching witch. I looked desperately for a weapon, finding only a heavy branch half submerged in mud. I grabbed it, holding it like a baseball bat. "You cannot escape what is ordained," Magdalena called, her voice somehow both ancient and girlish. "I've claimed you 5 times before. The 6th will complete the cycle." "I'm not who you think I am," I shouted back over the storm. "Your denials change nothing. The locket called to you. The mine recognizes your soul." She was closer now, close enough that I could see the unnatural blackness of her tongue as she spoke. "Your blood in the springs will lock your soul to mine forever." Lightning struck a nearby tree with a deafening crack. The massive ponderosa pine groaned, then toppled, directly between us and Magdalena. Fire spread rapidly despite the rain, creating a momentary barrier. I seized the opportunity, running along the creek bank. Luna raced ahead, somehow knowing which way to go. The rain began to ease, and through breaks in the clouds I caught glimpses of helicopter searchlights sweeping the canyon. Rescue was coming. We just needed to reach open ground where they could spot us. Luna suddenly stopped, growling at something ahead. Through the thinning rain, I saw why. Magdalena stood before us, somehow having circled ahead. Behind her, steam rose from what must be Jordan Hot Springs, a series of terraced pools descending the canyon wall, the water an unnatural red in the stormlight. "No more running," she said softly. "Your predecessors fought too. It changes nothing." This time, I didn't hesitate. I charged her with my makeshift club, swinging with all my strength. The branch connected with her shoulder, but instead of flesh, it met something hard as stone. The impact reverberated up my arms, nearly causing me to drop my weapon. Magdalena laughed. "Physical strength means nothing against old magic." She flicked her wrist again, and invisible force lifted me off my feet. I flew backward, landing hard at the edge of the lowest hot spring. The water hissed and bubbled an arm's length away, its surface oily and dark. Steam rising from it carried a metallic scent I recognized with horror. Blood. Luna attacked, teeth bared, but Magdalena was ready. The knife flashed, catching my dog across the shoulder. Luna yelped but didn't retreat, blood matting her black and white fur. "Luna, no!" I screamed, scrambling to my feet. Magdalena turned toward me, momentarily distracted. Always the same attachments. Always the same weaknesses. In that instant, Luna lunged again, this time catching Magdalena's knife arm in her jaws. The witch shrieked as Luna's teeth sank deep. The knife fell, landing point down in the soft earth between us. I dove for it, fingers closing around the carved handle. The metal burned cold against my skin, vibrating slightly as if alive. Magdalena threw Luna off with unnatural strength, sending my poor dog tumbling into the underbrush. Before the witch could recover, I slashed wildly with her own knife. The blade cut across her chest, but instead of blood, black smoke poured from the wound. Magdalena's scream shook the remaining raindrops from the trees. "Impossible!" she hissed. "The knife is bound to me." I didn't understand what was happening, but instinct took over. I slashed again, opening another smoking wound across her arm. Magdalena staggered backward, her heel touching the edge of the hot spring. "If I fall, you fall with me," she snarled, lunging forward to grab my wrist. Her strength was incredible, bones grinding together in her grip. She pulled me toward the bubbling spring, intent on dragging us both into its depths. I struggled, the knife still clutched in my free hand. With desperate strength, I drove the blade into her chest, directly where her heart should be. Magdalena froze, her milky eyes widening in genuine surprise. "Only one with my blood could wield it against me," she whispered. Her gaze searched my face with new understanding. "Not the girl who stole Santiago. You're of my line. My blood." A terrible smile spread across her face. Even better. The sky opened then, a final lightning bolt striking the knife still embedded in her chest. The metal conducted the charge, sending us both flying in opposite directions. I landed hard against a boulder, pain exploding through my ribs. Through blurred vision, I saw Magdalena rise one last time, her body now more smoke than substance. She reached toward me, mouth open in a silent scream as her form dispersed into tendrils of black mist that the wind quickly scattered. Where she had stood, only the knife remained, glowing red-hot in the mud. Luna limped to my side, whimpering softly. I hugged her close, wincing at the pain in my ribs. "Good girl," I murmured into her fur. "Best girl." The helicopter's searchlight found us minutes later, illuminating the small clearing and the now ordinary-looking hot springs. When rescue workers reached us, they found a battered woman, an injured dog, and a story no one would believe. The official report listed us as victims of a flash flood and exposure. My description of Magdalena was attributed to hypothermia-induced hallucinations. The knife, the locket, even the cabin, none were found when search teams investigated the area. But I know what I experienced. 6 months later, I still wake from nightmares of milky eyes and that eerie humming. Luna sleeps beside me now, her shoulder bearing a scar that no veterinarian can explain. A scar in the shape of one of those strange symbols. I've researched the history of the Gila Wilderness extensively since our return. In dusty archives of Silver City's Historical Society, I found mentions of a Mexican curandera named Magdalena Vasquez, who lived in the canyons during the 1870s. She was rumored to have murdered several women who resembled her dead husband's lover, a woman named Jessamine Davis. The parallels are too specific to dismiss. Skeptics might call it an extraordinary coincidence that fueled my hypothermic delusions. Perhaps they're right. But I've never told anyone about the small leather book that somehow made its way into my backpack, the one filled with spidery handwriting and red symbols, or about the streaks of gray that appeared in my hair overnight, or how, sometimes when I look in the mirror, I catch a glimpse of someone else looking back, someone with ancient, knowing eyes. I've also never returned to the Gila Wilderness, though something pulls at me, like a hook behind my navel, drawing me back toward those remote canyons, back to the springs. The pull grows stronger as the anniversary of our encounter approaches. Luna feels it too. She watches the western horizon, hackles raised whenever the wind carries the scent of ponderosa pine. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I catch her growling at empty corners of our bedroom, corners that, just for a moment, seem to hold shifting shadows and the faint sound of humming. I won't go back, I can't, but sometimes I wonder if part of me already has, the part Magdalena claimed when she said I was of her blood, the part that sometimes whispers, in dreams, that power waits for me in those red waters, if only I have the courage to claim it. The knife and locket are gone, but the connection remains. Magdalena may have been destroyed, but her legacy lives on, in the springs, in the forest, and possibly, terrifyingly, in me. After all, only one with her blood could wield the knife against her. Her blood, her line, her successor. My name is Jason Adams, and I am 34 years old. This happened in the remote wilderness of the Jicarilla Mountains in New Mexico, just south of the Carson National Forest. I'd always been an avid hiker, the kind who sought solitude among ancient pines rather than conversation at crowded bars. After my divorce last year, these wilderness excursions became less about recreation and more about necessity. A way to quiet the relentless noise in my head. I'd chosen the Jicarilla Range because of its isolation. The locals in Chama, the nearest town of any significance, called it the Forgotten Wilderness. Tourist pamphlets didn't mention it. Hikers rarely ventured there. It was precisely what I needed, a place where cell service died and responsibilities couldn't follow. My golden retriever, Scout, was the only companion I needed. He'd been with me through the worst of the divorce, sleeping at the foot of my bed during those first empty nights when the silence of the house threatened to suffocate me. Scout understood silence in a way humans couldn't. He knew when to offer comfort and when to simply exist beside me. We arrived at the trailhead on a Tuesday morning in early October. The Jicarilla Mountains wore their autumn colors like a warning, brilliant crimsons and golds that would soon give way to the stark nakedness of winter. The ranger station at the edge of the wilderness area was closed, a weathered sign indicating it was only staffed during summer months. I signed the trail register anyway, noting our intended 5-day route through the backcountry, ending at Cangelon Lakes. No one would check it until spring, but habits die hard. The trail began pleasantly enough, winding through aspen groves whose leaves shimmered like golden coins in the breeze. Scout bounded ahead, nose to the ground, tail waving like a banner. The air smelled of pine and earth and the coming winter, clean and sharp in my lungs. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. 3 hours in, we reached the first strange marker, a crude arrangement of stones forming what appeared to be an arrow, pointing off the main trail into a dense stand of ponderosa pines. I'd studied the maps carefully before setting out and knew no official trail existed there. Still, my curiosity piqued. Scout sniffed at the formation, hackles rising slightly along his spine. "Just some hiker's idea of helpful navigation," I told him, scratching behind his ears. But even as I spoke the words, something felt wrong. The stones were arranged too precisely and the arrow pointed directly at a narrow gap between two massive pines that almost seemed to form a doorway. I hesitated, then made the decision that I would replay endlessly in the months that followed. "Come on, boy, let's check it out." The makeshift path was barely discernible, just a slight depression in the pine needle carpet and occasional broken branches. As we progressed deeper, I noticed more stone formations, each one more elaborate than the last. What began as simple arrows evolved into intricate spirals and concentric circles. Scout's enthusiasm waned. He no longer ranged ahead but stayed close to my heels, occasionally whining. By late afternoon, I realized we'd wandered far from my planned route. The forest had grown denser, the pines closing ranks until they blocked most of the sunlight. The temperature dropped considerably. I pulled out my GPS only to find it glitching, the display showing our location jumping erratically across the map. My phone had no service, expected, but the compass app also spun wildly, unable to find north. "Electromagnetic anomaly," I muttered, trying to sound confident for Scout's benefit. The Jicarilla Mountains had old mining operations. Perhaps mineral deposits were interfering with the electronics. With daylight fading, I decided to make camp in a small clearing. As I set up the tent, Scout paced the perimeter, his behavior increasingly agitated. Twice he froze, staring intently into the darkening forest, a low growl building in his throat. "Hey, it's okay," I reassured him, but my words sounded hollow even to my own ears. I built a fire, larger than I normally would, the instinctive human response to encroaching darkness. As night fell completely, the fire's light created a small island in an ocean of absolute blackness. I'd camped in remote areas before, but this darkness felt different. Thicker somehow, almost tangible. The night sounds were wrong too. Forests are never truly silent. They breathe with the movements of nocturnal creatures, the rustle of wind through needles, the distant calls of owls. But here, the silence was broken only by occasional sounds I couldn't identify. Neither animal nor weather. Rhythmic tapping, like stone on stone. Brief whispers that might have been wind, except the air was still. Scout refused to settle, alternating between pressing against my side and standing at attention, facing the darkness beyond our firelight. I fed him extra treats, trying to normalize the situation, but his anxiety was contagious. I found myself straining to hear, to identify the source of his distress. Around midnight, the fire began to behave strangely. The flames, which had been burning steadily, suddenly flattened and turned an unnatural blue-green color. They twisted horizontally as if responding to a strong wind, yet the air remained perfectly still. Scout yelped and retreated to the tent. I followed, zipping us both inside, heart hammering against my ribs. I lay awake for hours, listening. The tapping sounds grew closer, then stopped directly outside our tent. Scout trembled against me, making small whimpering noises I'd never heard from him before. Then came a smell, rot and decay, like something long dead suddenly disturbed. I covered my mouth and nose with my shirt, eyes watering. Just before dawn, exhaustion finally pulled me under. I dreamt of walking through an endless forest where the trees had faces twisted in silent screams, their branches reaching for me with gnarled fingers. I woke to Scout's wet nose pressed urgently against my cheek. Sunlight filtered through the tent fabric, momentarily easing my fear. But when I unzipped the tent and crawled out, that relief evaporated. Our campsite had been rearranged. The fire pit, which I'd dug in the center of the clearing, was now at the perimeter. My backpack, which I'd left leaning against a log, hung from a branch 15 feet off the ground. Most disturbing were the stone formations, dozens of them, surrounding our tent in concentric circles. Scout refused to move more than a few inches from my side as I retrieved my pack. Inside, my food supplies were untouched, but something had been added. A small cloth pouch containing what looked like bird bones and dried herbs, tied with red thread. I dropped it immediately, wiping my hand on my pants. "We're leaving," I told Scout, quickly breaking down the tent. The rational part of my brain suggested local kids playing pranks, but we hadn't seen any other humans since beginning our hike, and the forest was too dense and remote for casual visitors. I abandoned my planned route, determined to head directly back the way we'd come. But within an hour of hiking, I realized none of the landmarks looked familiar. The GPS still malfunctioned, and the sun, which should have provided directional guidance, was obscured by a thick canopy of pine branches. By midday, we came upon a small stream I didn't recognize from our hike-in. The water ran clear, and my canteen was nearly empty. I knelt to refill it, and that's when I noticed the reflection in the water wasn't mine. The face looking back at me was gaunt, with hollow eye sockets and grayish skin pulled tight over prominent cheekbones. It smiled, revealing blackened gums and needle-like teeth. I jerked back, splashing water. When I looked again, only my own terrified face rippled in the surface. Scout barked furiously at the water, backing away and tugging at my sleeve with his teeth. Moving away from the stream, we pushed through increasingly dense vegetation until we stumbled into another clearing. And what we found there stops my breath even now, months later as I write this. In the center stood a crude shelter built from branches and animal hides. Surrounding it were effigies made from twisted branches and cord, vaguely human-shaped but wrong. Extra limbs, misshapen heads, features suggested by knots and burls in the wood. Hanging from the trees were dozens of small animal carcasses in various states of decay, positioned in a way that they all seemed to face the center of the clearing. The smell was overwhelming, decay mixed with something chemical and acrid. Scout began to retch, backing away. I should have followed his instinct, but some horrified curiosity kept me rooted, staring at the nightmarish display. Movement from the shelter snapped me from my trance. The hide covering the entrance pulled aside, and a figure emerged, human in basic shape only. What I first took for a severely deformed person, I now believe was something else entirely. It stood over 7 feet tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at odd angles. Its skin was the pallid gray of cave fish, mottled with dark patches like bruises. The face. I try not to remember the face, but it haunts my dreams. Eyes too large and entirely black, a mouth that split the head nearly in half, opening to reveal those same needle teeth I'd seen in the stream reflection. It saw me. It smiled. I ran. Scout at my heels, crashing through underbrush branches, whipping my face. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to buckle. When I finally stopped, gasping for air against a massive ponderosa, Scout was no longer with me. "Scout!" I called, forgetting in my panic that making noise might draw attention. "Scout!" No answering bark came. No rustle of approaching paws. Just that unnatural forest silence. I backtracked cautiously, calling more softly for Scout, torn between fear for myself and terror at what might have happened to my dog. After 15 minutes of searching, I heard a familiar whine. Following the sound, I found Scout huddled beneath a fallen log, trembling violently. When I reached for him, he growled, something he had never done to me before. "It's me, Buddy," I whispered, extending my hand slowly. "It's just me." He sniffed cautiously, then crawled forward, pressing against my legs. But something was wrong. His movements were stiff, unnatural. When he looked up at me, his eyes seemed darker than their usual warm amber. We needed to get out. The sun was already lowering, and I couldn't face another night in these woods. I picked a direction that seemed to slope downward, reasoning that it would eventually lead to a road or settlement. Scout followed, but at a distance, stopping occasionally to look back the way we had come. As dusk approached, the forest began to change in subtle ways. The trees grew closer together, their bark darkening to an almost black color. Fungi I didn't recognize grew in sprawling colonies across the forest floor, pale and ghostly in the fading light. The air became thick with moisture, though there were no clouds overhead. We came to another stream, or perhaps the same one, meandering through the landscape. I needed water but couldn't bring myself to approach. Scout had no such reservations. Before I could stop him, he trotted to the edge and began to drink. "Scout!" "No!" I lunged for him, but he danced away, watching me with those two dark eyes. Water dripped from his muzzle, but it wasn't clear like the stream. It was black, viscous, like oil. As it hit the ground, the small patches of moss withered visibly. When darkness fell completely, I had no choice but to make camp again. I couldn't risk breaking an ankle stumbling through unknown terrain at night. This time, I didn't build a fire. I didn't want to draw attention. We huddled in the tent, Scout still keeping his distance from me, occasionally making that strange whining sound. I must have dozed off despite my terror because I woke to Scout standing at the tent entrance, his body rigid. The zipper, which I had firmly closed, was now open. Cool air flowed in, carrying that same rotting smell. Scout turned to look at me, and in the dim starlight filtering through the tent fabric, his eyes reflected not the usual green gold of canine night vision, but solid black, like pools of oil. "Scout?" My voice cracked. He responded with a sound no dog should be able to make, a low, rattling laugh that raised every hair on my body. Then he was gone, slipping through the tent opening. I should have stayed put, should have waited for daylight. But he was my dog, my friend. I couldn't leave him. Grabbing my flashlight, I followed. The beam cut weakly through the darkness, catching glimpses of Scout's tail as he trotted ahead. He moved with purpose, never looking back, leading me deeper into the forest. After what seemed like hours but might have been minutes, time felt slippery, unreliable. We emerged into the largest clearing yet. Standing stones formed a rough circle, each one etched with symbols that seemed to crawl across the surface when caught in my flashlight beam. In the center was a depression in the earth, like a shallow pit. Scout sat at its edge, watching me expectantly. As I approached, movement erupted from the pit. Not one figure but many, unfolding themselves from impossibly compressed positions. The same gray-skinned creatures I'd seen earlier, 5 of them now, rising like nightmares made flesh. Among them stood a human figure, or what had once been human. She was an elderly woman, her body bent and twisted, skin hanging loose on a frame that seemed mostly bone. But her eyes were bright, alert, watching me with unmistakable intelligence. Around her neck hung a necklace of small animal skulls and polished stones. When she smiled, her teeth were dark like tarnished metal. Lost? Her voice was surprisingly strong with an accent I couldn't place. "They always get lost. The stones make sure of it." Scout moved to her side, pressing against her leg as he had once done with me. She stroked his head absently. "Your dog has good instincts, knew where to bring you." The creatures around her shifted restlessly, making those stone-tapping sounds I'd heard the previous night. "You feel it too, don't you? The thinness here, the closeness." "What are you talking about?" I managed to ask, though my mouth was desert dry. "What do you want?" "The Jicarilla have always known about this place. Called it the breathing space, where things can pass through." She gestured to the creatures. "My friends came long ago, showed me secrets, and now they're hungry again." One of the creatures stepped forward, its movement a horrible gliding shuffle. I stumbled backward, but my heel caught on something, one of the stone formations, and I fell hard. The old woman laughed. "They like fear, makes the passing easier." She snapped her fingers, and Scout, or the thing wearing Scout's shape, growled, advancing on me. "Your dog will be fine, better even. They take good care of their vessels." Understanding broke through my terror. You're going to trade places," she finished for me. "I'm old, used up. They need someone stronger to help them open the way for the others." She gestured to the standing stones. "This is just the first gate. There are others, all over these mountains." The creature reached me, its cold fingers closing around my wrist. Its touch burned like dry ice, numbing my skin instantly. I tried to pull away, but my body wouldn't respond properly, movement sluggish as if I were moving through syrup. I'd like to say I fought bravely, that I resisted with every ounce of strength. But the truth is, as the creature's influence spread through me like ice in my veins, a strange calm descended. The fear receded, replaced by an odd fascination. I could feel something pressing against the boundaries of my mind, seeking entrance. What saved me wasn't courage or strength, but Scout, the real Scout, fighting through whatever had taken hold of him. With a yelp that turned into a snarl, he launched himself not at me, but at the old woman, knocking her to the ground. The connection broke instantly, sensation flooding back into my limbs with painful intensity. The creatures shrieked, a sound like metal tearing, and converged on the struggling forms of Scout and the old woman. I didn't wait to see more. I ran, my only thought to put distance between myself and that nightmarish clearing. Dawn found me still running, stumbling, falling, getting up again. My clothes were torn, face scratched raw by branches I hadn't bothered to avoid. When the trees finally began to thin and I caught sight of a dirt road in the distance, I nearly wept. A pickup truck driven by a Jicarilla Apache forest ranger found me walking along that road around noon. I must have been a frightening sight, bloody, filthy, babbling about creatures and old women and standing stones. They took me to the small medical clinic in Chama, where a doctor gently suggested I was suffering from hallucinations brought on by dehydration and possible exposure to toxic fungal spores. I didn't argue. How could I explain what I'd experienced? How Scout had saved me but hadn't made it out himself? When I was stronger, I tried to lead another ranger back to find him, but the trails seemed completely different. We found no stone formations, no clearings with effigies, no sign of Scout. Sometimes at night I still hear tapping on my bedroom window, like stone on stone. My new apartment is on the 3rd floor. I keep the blinds closed. 3 hikers have gone missing in the Jicarilla Mountains since my experience last October. The authorities blame treacherous terrain, unpredictable weather, poor preparation. Search parties found no trace, just their empty cars at trailheads. I know what found them. Sometimes I dream of Scout. In these dreams, he's running through those dark woods, but something's wrong with how he moves. Jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on strings. His eyes are black pools, and when he opens his mouth, the sound that emerges isn't a bark, but that same rattling laugh. He's leading someone deeper into the forest, toward the standing stones and what waits there. Someone with my face. And I know, with the cold certainty of nightmare logic that someday I'll have to go back. Oh, the old woman's words echo in my dreams. They take good care of their vessels. They're calling me home. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 28 years old. This happened in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of New Mexico, where the pine forests climb toward jagged peaks and ancient trails wind through valleys that seem untouched by time. I'd been planning this solo backpacking trip for months, a week-long escape into wilderness to celebrate completing my doctoral dissertation. After years hunched over microscopes and computer screens studying microbiological samples, I craved open space, fresh air, and solitude. The Wheeler Peak Wilderness area in the Carson National Forest seemed perfect, remote enough to avoid crowds, but with established trails I could navigate confidently as a solo female hiker. My research advisor thought I was crazy. "You're going alone?" Dr. Winters had asked, genuine concern in her voice. "At least take bear spray." I'd laughed it off. "The wildlife is part of the appeal," I told her. "Besides, I grew up camping. I know what I'm doing." Looking back at that conversation now, I want to scream at my past self. Run, stay home, lock your doors. Because there are things in those mountains far worse than bears. I arrived at the Columbine Canyon trailhead on a crisp Tuesday morning in early September. The parking area held only 2 other vehicles, a dusty pickup and a compact SUV with Colorado plates. Perfect. I wanted solitude, not a conga line of hikers. After double-checking my gear, tent, sleeping bag, water filter, first aid kit, topo maps, compass, satellite messenger for emergencies, and enough lightweight meals for 8 days, I shouldered my pack and set off. The trail began gently enough, following Columbine Creek through a mixed forest of aspen and pine. Golden sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the path ahead. Birds called from the branches. A light breeze carried the scent of pine resin and wild mint. It was, in those first hours, exactly the wilderness experience I'd been craving. I made good progress that day, covering nearly 7 miles before making camp in a small clearing near a tributary of the main creek. I pitched my tent, filtered water, and cooked a simple dinner of rehydrated pasta while watching the sunset paint the distant peaks in shades of amber and rose. As darkness fell, I hung my food bag from a tree branch well away from my tent, bare precautions, and crawled into my sleeping bag. That first night passed peacefully. The only sounds were the gentle gurgle of the creek, the whisper of wind through pine needles, and the occasional hoot of an owl. The trouble began on the second day. I woke at dawn, eager to continue upward toward the alpine meadows that, according to my map, lay about 6 miles ahead. After a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal and coffee, I packed up and hit the trail. The path grew steeper as I climbed, transitioning from mixed forest to predominantly pine and fir. By mid-morning, I reached a rocky outcropping that offered spectacular views of the valley below. I paused to catch my breath, drink some water, and take a few photos with my phone, which showed no service as expected. That's when I noticed the first oddity, a small stone cairn just off trail. Rock cairns weren't unusual on hiking paths, of course, often used as trail markers. But this one seemed purposely hidden, nestled among a cluster of boulders where most hikers wouldn't spot it. Curious, I approached for a closer look. The cairn consisted of 7 small stones balanced with surprising precision. At its base lay a tiny bundle of dried herbs bound with what looked like human hair. A chill ran through me despite the warm sun. Something about the arrangement felt deliberate, ritualistic. I took a quick photo of it with my phone and continued hiking, trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. An hour later, I spotted another cairn, identical to the first, 7 stones with a bundle of herbs. This one stood directly on the trail, impossible to miss. I was certain it hadn't been there when I'd passed this way on my map-checking detour earlier. Someone was on the trail with me, building these structures. The thought wasn't immediately alarming. Other hikers used these trails after all, but something about the cairn's appearance and placement felt off. By early afternoon, I'd spotted 5 more identical cairns, each with the same herb bundle. They appeared at increasingly shorter intervals, as if marking a countdown to something. The trail had grown rougher, winding through a section of forest damaged by a relatively recent fire. Blackened trunks stood like sentinels among new undergrowth. The ground was covered with soot that puffed up with each step, coating my hiking boots in fine black powder. I checked my map. According to the topography, I should be approaching the alpine meadow. Instead, the burned forest stretched ahead as far as I could see. Had I somehow strayed from the trail? I checked my compass. I was still heading north-northeast, which aligned with the trail on my map. But the landscape didn't match what should be here. I decided to press on. The afternoon sun would soon be dropping behind the mountains, and I needed to find a suitable campsite. The burned area would have fewer options for hanging my food bag properly. As I hiked through the fire-scarred forest, I became aware of a strange silence that had fallen. No birdsong, no insect buzz, no rustle of small animals in the undergrowth, just the crunch of my boots on ash and the increasingly loud sound of my own breathing. Then, cutting through that unnatural silence, came a sound that stopped me in my tracks. A child's voice, singing. "Hello?" I called out, swiveling to locate the source. "Is someone there?" The singing stopped immediately. I strained to hear anything beyond my own heartbeat, which now seemed thunderously loud. "Hello?" I tried again. "I'm a hiker. Are you okay?" Nothing. Just that oppressive silence. I continued forward, moving more cautiously now. The trail dipped suddenly, leading into a narrow ravine with steep sides. This feature wasn't on my map either. I was increasingly certain I'd somehow gotten off trail, despite following what appeared to be a clear path. At the bottom of the ravine, the trail opened into a small clearing. In its center stood the largest cairn yet, a waist-high structure of 7 large stones. Unlike the others, this one had something dark smeared across its top stone, something that looked disturbingly like blood. I approached warily, my skin prickling with gooseflesh despite the warm afternoon. The substance was indeed blood, still slightly tacky to the touch. Recent. And at the base of the cairn lay a child's shoe. A small red sneaker, worn at the toes and caked with the same black ash that covered the ground. My first thought was search and rescue mode. A child was lost in these woods, possibly injured. The blood suggested they needed help. I dropped my pack and began scanning the surrounding area, calling out, "Hello! I'm here to help. Are you hurt?" The singing started again, closer this time. A simple melody, the kind of counting song children learn in kindergarten. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Where are you?" I called, spinning in place trying to locate the source. "Please, I want to help you." The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by a girl's voice, clear and direct. "You can't help me, but I can help you." I whirled toward the sound. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a small figure. A girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with long dark hair and pale skin. She wore a simple white dress, inexplicably clean despite the ash-covered ground. Her feet were bare and filthy, covered in what looked like dried blood and soot. "Are you lost?" I asked, taking a step toward her. "Are you hurt? That blood?" "It's not mine," she said, her voice oddly flat. "It belongs to the hollow." I stopped, confusion momentarily overriding concern. "The hollow? What do you mean?" "Under the mountain," she explained as if this should be obvious, "where the old ones sleep." A chill ran down my spine. Something about this child was very wrong. Her stillness, the way she spoke, the utter incongruity of her presence here, alone, in this burned section of forest. "What's your name?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "Are you out here alone?" "My name is Lucia," she said, "and nobody is ever truly alone in these mountains." She took a step backward toward the forest. "They're waking now. You should run." "Who's waking?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Lucia, are there other people nearby? Your parents?" "No parents," she said. "Not anymore. And it's not people." She took another step back. "The stones opened the way. We built them, me and the others." She was backing into the forest now, her white dress stark against the blackened trees. "Wait," I called. "Don't go. It's not safe out here alone." Lucia smiled, an expression that never reached her dark eyes. "I'm not the one in danger." She pointed to the blood-smeared cairn. "They're coming up through the hollow. The gateway is open." Then she turned and ran into the forest with unnatural speed, vanishing among the burned trunks. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to chase after her. She was clearly a child in some kind of trouble, possibly suffering from exposure or dehydration that was causing delusions. But another part, a primal instinct I couldn't name, screamed at me to get as far away from this place as possible. While I stood there debating, the ground beneath my feet shifted. Just slightly, like a sleeper turning over. I looked down in time to see fine cracks appear in the ash-covered soil around the cairn. The blood on the top stone seemed to be sinking in, absorbed by the rock itself. The ground shifted again, more noticeably this time. The cairn stones rattled against each other. From deep below came a sound I felt more than heard, a low vibration that resonated in my chest cavity. This was no normal seismic activity. Something was happening directly beneath the cairn. Something connected to the blood, to the strange child, to this entire wrong section of forest. I backed away, reaching for my pack. My satellite messenger was inside. I could trigger an SOS, get help out here. As I turned to grab it, the ground gave one final, violent lurch. The cairn collapsed, stones tumbling outward. Where it had stood, a hole now gaped, perfectly circular, perhaps 3 feet in diameter. Complete darkness filled it. Not the darkness of a shadow or a cave mouth, but an absolute absence of light that seemed to swallow the late afternoon sun. And from that darkness came a smell. Ancient decay, wet stone, something chemical and sharp that burned my nostrils. I scrambled for my pack, pulled out the satellite messenger with shaking hands. As I fumbled with the emergency button, something emerged from the hole. It came slowly, sinuously, a pale appendage that resembled a human arm but was wrong in fundamental ways. Too long. Too many joints. Fingers that bent backward. It braced against the edge of the hole and pushed, revealing more of itself. A shoulder, a torso, a head. The head swiveled toward me, though it had no visible eyes. Just smooth pale skin stretched over an elongated skull. Its mouth, however, was enormous. A lipless gash that split its face nearly in half, revealing row upon row of needle-like teeth. I dropped the satellite messenger, primal terror overwhelming rational thought. The device clattered to the ground, its emergency light blinking red. Whether I'd successfully triggered the SOS, I couldn't tell. What emerged fully from the hole stood at least 7 feet tall, its body emaciated yet somehow powerful. Its skin was the color of cave fish, a pale translucence that revealed shadowy organs beneath. It moved with a jerking, insectile grace, tilting its eyeless head as if scenting the air. I stood perfectly still, not even daring to breathe, some instinctive part of me hoping it hunted by movement or sound. The creature's head swiveled directly toward me, mouth opening wider than should be physically possible. It made a sound then, a high, keening whistle that drilled into my eardrums like needles. I ran. Abandoning my pack, the satellite messenger, everything except the water bottle clipped to my belt, I sprinted back up the ravine trail. Behind me, I heard the creature give chase, its movements a horrible scuttling that covered ground far too quickly. The ravine was steep, the trail loose with ash and gravel. I slipped repeatedly, tearing my hands on rocks as I scrambled upward. The creature's whistling grew louder, closer. I risked a glance back. It was coming up the slope in great bounding leaps, covering 10 feet at a time. Its arms, all 4 of them, I now saw, reached toward me, fingers splayed. I reached the top of the ravine and kept running, lungs burning, legs pumping. The burned forest was disorienting, every direction looking the same, blackened trees, ash-covered ground. I had no idea if I was heading toward the trail or deeper into wilderness. Behind me, the whistling stopped. I didn't slow down. If anything, the silence was more terrifying than the sound had been. As I ran, I became aware of movement in my peripheral vision. Flashes of white among the black tree trunks. Lucia's dress? Or more creatures emerging from whatever lay beneath this cursed ground? I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing behind a fallen tree trunk in a small depression that offered some concealment. My lungs heaved as I tried to silence my gasping breaths. Blood roared in my ears. As my breathing slowed, I strained to hear any sign of pursuit. Nothing. Just that same unnatural silence that had first put me on edge. I didn't know how long I huddled there, minutes or hours. The sun was setting, shadows lengthening across the ash-strewn ground. Soon, it would be dark. I had no pack, no shelter, no food, just the water bottle at my hip and the clothes I wore. My phone showed no service, as expected, but I could at least use its flashlight when darkness fell. If I could orient myself, find the real trail again, maybe I could hike out to the trailhead through the night. As I was formulating this desperate plan, a twig snapped nearby. I froze, pressing myself flatter against the ground behind the log. "I know you're there," came Lucia's voice. "I can hear you breathing." I remained silent, heart hammering. After my encounter with the creature, I no longer saw Lucia as a lost child. She was something else, something connected to the horror I'd just witnessed. "You can't hide from them," she continued, her voice coming closer. "They can smell your fear, your sweat, your blood." I still didn't move. Through a small gap between the log and the ground, I could see her bare feet as she walked slowly past my hiding place. Still filthy, still blood-stained. "The others ran too," she said conversationally. "The ones who came before you, but the hollow ones always found them." She stopped directly in front of my hiding place. "I'm trying to help you," she insisted. "There's a way to survive this, to appease them." Despite my terror, curiosity stirred. If she truly knew how to escape whatever was hunting me. "How?" I whispered. Lucia crouched down, peering into my hiding place with those dark, empty eyes. "Blood calls to them. Blood opens the way, but blood can also seal it." "What does that mean?" "A sacrifice," she said simply, "freely given at the holy place. That's why we build the cairns, to mark the path to the altar." My blood ran cold. "You're saying I need to sacrifice something? Like an animal?" Lucia tilted her head, considering me with alien detachment. "It must be precious. It must have life. It must be given willingly." She reached out a small hand toward me. "Come, I'll show you the way to the altar." Every instinct screamed at me to stay hidden, to wait until she left, to find my own way out of this nightmare. But darkness was falling rapidly, and I had no supplies, no direction. And whatever the hollow ones were, they were hunting me, if there was truly a way to stop them. I reluctantly emerged from my hiding place. Lucia smiled, that same expression that never touched her eyes, and turned, gesturing for me to follow. "The altar is on the mountain," she explained as we walked, "where the old ones first came through, long before people built lodges and trails here." "What are they?" I asked, keeping a cautious distance behind her. "The hollow ones." "They've been here always," she said, "sleeping under the mountain, dreaming in the dark. Sometimes they wake hungry." "And you help them?" She glanced back at me. "I have no choice. None of us do. Once you're marked, you serve." A horrible suspicion formed. "The others you mentioned, the ones who came before me, They're like you now, aren't they?" Lucia didn't answer directly. Some serve in life, some in death, some in between. We walked in silence after that, climbing steadily upward through the burned forest. As we ascended, the fire damage became less severe, with patches of living trees interspersed among the blackened trunks. The terrain grew rockier, the slope steeper. Night had fallen completely, but Lucia seemed to have no trouble navigating in the darkness. I switched on my phone's flashlight, conserving battery by only illuminating the ground directly in front of me. As we climbed, I tried to formulate a plan. I could run again, but to where? I had no idea where the trail was, where the trailhead lay, and in the darkness with those creatures hunting. No, better to play along for now. See what this altar was. Look for an opportunity to escape once I had more information. "How much further?" I asked as we picked our way across a boulder field, my legs burning from the steep ascent. "We're close," Lucia said. "Listen." I stopped, holding my breath. At first, I heard nothing but the faint whisper of wind through the surviving pines. Then, as if rising from the ground itself, a low humming. Rhythmic, almost musical, but with discordant notes that set my teeth on edge. "What is that?" "The others," Lucia said. "Preparing the way." We crested a ridge and I saw it. A flat stone outcropping bathed in moonlight. On it stood a circle of figures in white. Some were children like Lucia. Others were adults of various ages. All wore the same blank expression. All had that same unnatural stillness. In the center of their circle stood a stone structure larger and more elaborate than the cairns I'd seen earlier. This was clearly the altar Lucia had mentioned, a flat-topped construction of fitted stones that stood about waist-high. The humming came from the white-clad figures, their voices blending in that strange, unsettling melody. "Who are they?" I whispered. "Travelers," Lucia said. "Hikers, climbers, people who found the hollow ones, people who made choices." I studied the figures more carefully, my blood turning to ice. Their clothing, beneath the uniform white wrappings, spanned decades of outdoor styles. A man wore the heavy boots and wool pants of a 1970s backpacker. A teenage girl had a faded t-shirt visible beneath her white shroud that advertised a rock concert from the early 2000s. These were missing hikers. Decades of them. People who had vanished in these mountains without a trace. "They're dead," I breathed. "Not all," Lucia corrected. "Some still breathe, some still bleed. It depends on what they offered, what was taken." She led me toward the circle. As we approached, the figures stopped their humming and turned to watch our approach with the same empty eyes Lucia possessed. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Now you choose," Lucia said. "Give something precious to seal the gateway, or become like us, serving the hollow ones until your body fails and only your essence remains." We reached the altar. Up close, I could see dark stains on the stone surface. Ancient bloodstains, layer upon layer of them. The white-clad figures parted to let us through, then closed ranks behind us, forming a tight circle around the altar. There would be no running now. "What do I need to give?" I asked, desperately stalling for time, searching for any possibility of escape. "Something you value above all else," Lucia explained. "Something irreplaceable." My mind raced. I had nothing with me. No pack, no gear, nothing but my clothes, my water bottle, and my phone. None of these seemed like the kind of precious sacrifice that would satisfy ancient underground horrors. Unless... "My blood," I suggested. "Would that work?" Lucia tilted her head. "Blood alone is temporary. The gateway would open again with the next full moon." She studied me with those empty eyes. "But there are other sacrifices. Your sight, your voice, your memories." A chill ran through me as I understood what she was suggesting. These weren't physical sacrifices. They were parts of myself, my essence, my humanity. Before I could respond, A familiar whistling sound cut through the night air. From the darkness beyond the stone outcropping, pale shapes emerged. 3 of the creatures I'd encountered by the hole in the ground. They moved with that same jerking, insectile grace, their eyeless faces turned toward our gathering. The circle of white-clad figures began humming again. Faster now, more urgent. Lucia took my hand, her small fingers ice-cold against my skin. "Choose, quickly," she urged. "They're hungry. If you don't offer something willingly, they'll take everything." The creatures approached the edge of the outcropping, their massive mouths opening and closing with audible clicks. I could feel their attention fixed on me, the only true human present, the only one still whole and untouched. "How?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How do I give something up?" "With intention," Lucia said. "Place your hands on the altar, speak your sacrifice aloud, mean it." The creatures were on the outcropping now, advancing slowly as if savoring the moment. I had no choice, no escape, no rescue coming. I placed my trembling hands on the cold stone of the altar. "I offer," I began, my mind racing. What could I sacrifice that would satisfy these horrors without destroying who I was? An idea came. Terrible, but perhaps survivable. Something precious, yes, but something I could live without. "I offer my dreams," I said firmly, "my ability to dream when I sleep." Lucia's eyes widened slightly, the first real expression I'd seen on her face. "An unusual choice," she murmured. "Is it enough?" I asked. Before she could answer, the stone beneath my hands grew warm. The humming of the circle intensified, rising to a pitch that made my ears ring. The creatures stopped their advance, eyeless faces tilted as if listening. "It is acceptable," Lucia confirmed. "Dreams are the pathway between worlds, a fitting seal for the gateway." Relief flooded through me, quickly replaced by a new fear. "What happens now?" "Now you complete the offering," she said, "with blood to bind it." One of the white-clad figures stepped forward, an elderly man whose roomy eyes held the same emptiness as Lucia's. He handed her a stone knife with an obsidian blade. Lucia offered it to me. "A small cut," she instructed, "across your palm. Let the blood touch the altar while you think of dreams. All the dreams you've ever had, all the dreams you might have in the future. Feel them leaving you." My hand shook as I took the knife. Part of me still screamed that this was madness, that I should run, fight, anything but participate in this ritual. But the creatures stood just yards away, mouths agape. The circle of figures blocked any escape. I drew the blade across my palm, wincing at the sharp sting. Blood welled immediately. I placed my bleeding hand on the altar, focusing as instructed on dreams. Childhood dreams of flight, adult dreams of success, nightmares, fantasies, all the unconscious wanderings of my sleeping mind. A strange sensation spread from my hand up my arm, a cold numbness that reached my chest, my throat, finally my head. Behind my eyes, images flashed rapidly. Dream fragments, sleep memories, all seeming to drain away like water through a sieve. The humming reached a crescendo. The creatures reared back, their whistling changing tone to something that sounded almost like pain. The stone beneath my bleeding hand grew hotter, almost burning. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The humming ceased. The creatures retreated into the darkness. The cold numbness in my body dissipated. I sagged against the altar, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. "It is done," Lucia announced. "The gateway is sealed until the next calling." The circle of white-clad figures began to disperse, wandering off in different directions without a word. Soon, only Lucia remained with me on the outcropping. "What now?" I asked, wrapping my bleeding hand in the hem of my shirt. "Now, you return to your world," she said. "Follow the path down the mountain. By dawn, you'll reach the true trail. And you, all of you, I gestured toward the departing figures. "We remain," Lucia said simply, "until we're called again, until the Hollow Ones hunger." She paused, studying me with those empty eyes. "You'll never dream again. Never visit that borderland between waking and sleeping. It's the price you chose." "Better than the alternative," I said, thinking of her and the others, trapped in this half-existence. "Yes," she agreed, surprising me. "I chose differently when my time came. I offered my future, all the years I would have lived. Now I exist only in this eternal present, neither growing nor changing." She looked down at her child's body. "I was 9 years old in 1887. I will always be 9 years old." My heart broke for her despite my terror. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said. "Your sacrifice will hold the gateway closed for one cycle of the moon. Then the stones will need feeding again." She pointed to a narrow path leading down the mountainside. "Go now. Don't return to these mountains, and never speak of what you've seen." I didn't need to be told twice. I staggered down the path, exhaustion weighing my limbs but fear propelling me forward. True to Lucia's word, by dawn I found myself back on the main trail, miraculously only a mile or so from the trailhead. I reached my car by mid-morning. My pack, my gear, everything I'd abandoned in my flight was gone. But I was alive, physically whole, if forever changed. That was 3 months ago. True to the terms of my sacrifice, I haven't dreamed since. My sleep is a black void, an emptiness where dreams should be. Doctors are baffled, suggesting everything from brain abnormalities to psychological trauma. They don't understand what I gave up, what I had to give up. I've researched the history of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains since my return. The stories are there, if you know where to look, centuries of disappearances, of hikers and hunters who ventured out and never returned. Indigenous legends of hollow people who live beneath the mountains. Spanish explorer accounts of Los que silban, those who whistle, pale creatures glimpsed in mountain caves. And, most chilling of all, the records of a child named Lucia Montoya, who vanished while picking berries on her family's homestead in 1887. Her body was never found. I write this as a warning. If you hike in the Sangre de Cristo range, particularly near Wheeler Peak, and you find stone cairns with herb bundles at their base, turn back. If you hear a child singing in a forest where no child should be, run. And if you ever meet a little girl named Lucia in a white dress, with feet stained by blood and ash, well, I hope you find a better sacrifice than I did. I may have lost my dreams, but sometimes I wonder if I lost something more fundamental, something I won't recognize until it's too late, because sometimes, in unguarded moments, I find myself humming a strange, discordant melody, and sometimes I feel an urge to stack stones in sevens. My name is Emily Hall, and I am 28 years old. This happened in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of New Mexico, and it isn't over. My name is Michael Williams, and I am 34 years old. This happened in the Gila National Forest of New Mexico, where the pines stretch endlessly into mist-shrouded mountains, and cell service disappears like smoke in the wind. I never should have gone hiking alone. Everyone tells you not to, but after Emily left, taking half our friends in the divorce, I needed solitude, space to breathe away from sympathetic glances and awkward conversations. 3 days in the wilderness seemed like the perfect reset. Just me, my German Shepherd Rex, and miles of unspoiled backcountry. The Gila Wilderness was my choice because it felt like the edge of the world. Over 500,000 acres of rugged forest, with deep canyons and ancient cliff dwellings scattered throughout. I'd planned a route along the Middle Fork Trail, heading toward Jordan Hot Springs, challenging enough to exhaust my body so my mind could rest, but nothing beyond my capabilities as an experienced hiker. The first day went perfectly. Rex bounded ahead on the trail, his tail wagging with excitement at each new smell. The late September weather was ideal. Warm days, cool nights, and the aspens just beginning to turn golden. We covered 12 miles before setting up camp in a small clearing near a creek. I fell asleep to the gentle babble of water over stones and Rex's steady breathing beside my tent. The trouble started on our second day. I woke to a strange silence. No birdsong, no insects buzzing, just the whisper of wind through pine needles. Even Rex seemed unsettled, pacing the perimeter of our campsite with his ears flattened against his head. "What's up, buddy?" I reached out to scratch behind his ears, but he flinched away, something he'd never done before. His eyes were fixed on the dense forest beyond our clearing. I chalked it up to wildlife. Maybe a bear or mountain lion had passed nearby during the night. After a quick breakfast, we broke camp and continued along the trail, planning to reach Jordan Hot Springs by mid-afternoon. The path narrowed as we climbed higher into the mountains, weaving through stands of ponderosa pines and across small streams. I checked my GPS occasionally, marking our progress. Around noon, the device started acting strangely, the screen flickering, coordinates jumping erratically before settling again. "Technology," I muttered, tapping the screen. "Always fails when you need it most." That's when I noticed Rex had stopped walking. He stood rigid on the trail ahead, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Rex, what is it?" I followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual, just more trees, rocks, the typical wilderness scenery. I whistled for him to continue, but he refused to move. "Come on, boy, we need to keep going." When he still wouldn't budge, I clipped his leash to his collar and gently tugged. He reluctantly followed, but kept looking back over his shoulder every few steps. By early afternoon, we reached a fork in the trail not marked on my map. The GPS was no help, showing us in a completely different location than we should have been. I pulled out my paper map and compass, trying to triangulate our position using the peaks around us. Something wasn't right. According to my calculations, we should be heading southwest, but the compass needle swung wildly, spinning in complete circles before stopping at random points. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm afternoon sun. I'd been hiking these mountains for years and had never experienced anything like this. I decided to trust my instincts and take the path that seemed to lead downhill, toward what I hoped was the middle fork of the Gila River. The trail became fainter as we descended, eventually disappearing altogether among fallen logs and dense underbrush. I checked my watch, 3:42 p.m. We had maybe 4 hours of daylight left. Enough time to find the river and make camp even if we were off course. "We'll be fine," I told Rex, trying to convince myself as much as him. "We've got food and water for 5 days." We pushed through the undergrowth for another hour before I heard it, the blessed sound of running water. Relief flooded through me as we emerged from the trees onto the rocky bank of a wide stream. But my relief quickly turned to confusion. This wasn't the middle fork. The water ran clear and shallow over smooth stones, nothing like the deeper, faster-flowing river we should have encountered. I pulled out my map again, scrutinizing every contour line and blue squiggle. There was no stream marked in this area, at least not on my map. Unease crawled up my spine like a centipede. "We must have gone farther off course than I thought," I said aloud, trying to keep panic at bay. Rex whined and pawed at the ground. He needed water, and so did I. We'd been hiking for hours in the afternoon heat. "Okay, new plan. We'll follow this stream downhill. It has to connect to the river eventually." I filled our water bottles, added purification tablets, and let Rex drink his fill. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, we followed the stream through a narrow canyon. The walls rose higher on either side, casting long shadows across the water. I began looking for a suitable campsite, somewhere flat and sheltered from the wind. Around a bend in the canyon, I spotted what looked like an ideal location, a sandy bank beneath an overhanging rock ledge. As we approached, I noticed something odd, a circle of stones with the remains of a campfire in the center, recent by the look of the ashes. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No answer, just the echo of my voice bouncing off the canyon walls. Rex sniffed around the fire pit, then suddenly backed away, growling. "What is it? Someone's old camp, buddy. Nothing to worry about." But as I set down my pack and examined the site more closely, I understood Rex's unease. The fire circle contained partially burned bones, small, delicate bones that looked disturbingly human. Finger bones. My heart hammered against my ribs. There had to be an explanation. Animal bones, perhaps, that just resembled human ones. I knelt for a closer look and froze when I spotted something else among the ashes. A small, charred piece of metal. I picked it up and wiped away the soot. A wedding ring. Not just any wedding ring. It was identical to the one I'd worn for 5 years before Emily asked for a divorce. Same pattern, same inscription inside. Forever and always. I dropped it like it had burned me. This was impossible. My ring was in a drawer back home. I hadn't brought it with me. "We're not staying here," I told Rex, shoving everything back into my pack with trembling hands. The sun was setting now, painting the canyon walls blood red. We needed to find another campsite quickly. I hurried along the stream, Rex trotting anxiously beside me, both of us eager to put distance between ourselves and that fire pit. A quarter-mile downstream, the canyon widened into a small valley. Massive ponderosa pines lined the banks, their branches creating natural shelters. I chose a spot beneath one of the largest trees and quickly set up camp as darkness fell. The temperature dropped rapidly, and I built a small fire, trying not to think about what I'd seen in the abandoned campsite. Rex refused to settle, pacing around our camp and occasionally staring into the darkness with a low growl. I'd never seen him so agitated. He was normally the calmest dog, unfazed by wildlife or strange surroundings. "It's okay," I said, more to myself than to him. "We'll head back tomorrow, first light." I heated water for my freeze-dried dinner, but found I had little appetite. The food tasted like ash in my mouth. After forcing down a few bites, I secured our food in a bear bag and hung it from a high branch away from our tent. Inside my sleeping bag, I tried to rationalize what had happened. The GPS malfunction could be explained by the rugged terrain or a low battery. The compass, maybe there were mineral deposits in the area affecting its accuracy. The ring and bones. I must have imagined the similarities. Stress and isolation can play tricks on the mind. I drifted into an uneasy sleep, waking frequently to Rex's whimpers and the strange sounds of the forest at night. Around midnight, I jolted awake to the dog's deep, threatening growl. He stood at the tent entrance, every muscle tense. "What is it?" I whispered, fumbling for my headlamp. Before I could turn it on, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling our campsite. Not the four-footed movement of an animal, but the distinct cadence of a human. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps stopped directly outside the tent. Rex's growl deepened, the hair along his spine standing straight up. Then came a sound that froze the blood in my veins, a low, rasping voice. "Michael." No one had called my name. It was the wind, I told myself. Just the wind rustling the tent fabric. Michael Williams. Definitely not the wind. Someone, or something, knew my name. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. No response. The footsteps resumed, circling again, then gradually fading into the distance. Rex stopped growling but remained alert, his body rigid against mine. I didn't sleep again that night. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the trees, I packed up camp with shaking hands. We needed to get back to civilization, now. But which way? We'd gone so far off course that I wasn't sure of the quickest route back to a trailhead. I decided to continue following the stream downhill, hoping it would eventually lead to the main river and, from there, to a trail I recognized. The morning was eerily still, a thick fog clinging to the ground and winding between the trees like ghostly fingers. Rex stayed close to my side as we hiked, no longer ranging ahead as he had on our first day. After an hour of walking, the stream widened and deepened, its current picking up speed. This looked more like the Middle Fork I remembered, which gave me hope that we were heading in the right direction. The fog began to lift as the sun rose higher, revealing the towering canyon walls around us. Around mid-morning, we came upon something unexpected, a small cabin nestled among the trees near the riverbank. It looked old, but well-maintained, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. Relief washed over me. People meant help, directions, maybe even a ride back to my car. "Hello," I called as we approached. "Anyone home?" The wooden door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a deeply lined face and sharp blue eyes. He wore faded overalls and a flannel shirt, looking every bit the mountain hermit. "Don't get many visitors out this way," he said, his voice gravelly from disuse, "especially not this time of year." "I'm afraid I've gotten a bit lost," I admitted. "My GPS malfunctioned, and my compass isn't working right. I'm trying to get back to the Middle Fork trailhead." The old man squinted at me, then at Rex. "That's a mighty fine dog you got there. German Shepherd, right? Good breed, loyal." "Yes, he is. His name's Rex." "Rex," the man repeated, nodding slowly. "Good name for a good dog." He stepped back from the doorway. "Come on in. Name's Elijah Blackwood. Been living out here for nigh on 30 years. I hesitated, then followed him inside. The cabin was simple but comfortable. A wood stove in one corner, a rough-hewn table and chairs, shelves lined with canned goods and books. A rifle hung above the door. "Coffee?" Elijah offered, already pulling a battered pot from the stove. "That would be great, thanks." He poured 2 cups and set one before me. "So, how'd you end up this far off the trail? Middle Fork's a good 5 miles east of here." I explained our journey, leaving out the strange incidents with the fire pit and the voice in the night. No need to sound like a lunatic to the one person who might help us get back safely. Elijah listened, nodding occasionally. "Happening more often these days," he said when I finished. "Hikers getting turned around, ending up places they shouldn't be." "Is there something wrong with the trail markers?" "Ain't the markers," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "It's these woods. They change sometimes, move things around." I laughed nervously. "Woods can't move things around." Elijah didn't smile. "Maybe not the woods themselves, but what lives in them can." A chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of the coffee in my hands. "What do you mean, what lives in them?" The old man leaned forward, lowering his voice as if afraid of being overheard. "Folks around here call it El Caminante, the walker. Been stories about it long as anyone can remember. Ancestral Puebloans knew about it. So did the Apache. Spanish settlers too. Thing that walks these canyons looking for the lost." I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Every remote area had its local legends, its campfire stories designed to frighten tourists. "And what does this walker do when it finds someone who's lost?" I asked, humoring him. Elijah's eyes locked onto mine. "Depends. Sometimes it just watches. Sometimes it leads them in circles till they die of exposure. And sometimes—" He trailed off, glancing toward the window. "Sometimes it takes their form." "Their form?" "Like a skin. Wears it while it hunts for the next one." Rex, who had been lying quietly at my feet, suddenly raised his head and growled at the window. I followed his gaze but saw nothing except trees and mist. "Your dog senses things," Elijah said. "Animals always do. They know when it's nearby." "Look, Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate the coffee and the conversation, but I really need to get back to the trailhead. Can you point me in the right direction?" He nodded slowly, seemingly unperturbed by my dismissal of his story. "I'll do better than that. I'll take you part of the way myself. Not safe for you to be wandering around here, especially not now." "Now? What's special about now? Fall equinox was just days ago. Boundary between worlds gets thin this time of year." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't believe in boundaries between worlds or creatures that stole people's forms, but something stopped me. The memory of that voice in the night, calling my name. The wedding ring in the ashes. "All right," I said. "I'd appreciate the guide." Elijah gathered a few supplies into an old backpack. Water, some jerky, a tarnished compass that looked ancient. He took the rifle down from above the door and checked that it was loaded before slinging it over his shoulder. "That necessary?" I asked, nodding toward the weapon. "Better to have it and not need it," he replied grimly. We set out around noon, Elijah leading the way along a faint game trail that paralleled the river. Rex seemed more relaxed now, occasionally ranging ahead to sniff at interesting smells. The old man moved with surprising agility, navigating the rocky terrain with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of it. "How far to the main trail?" I asked after we'd been walking for about an hour. "Couple more miles," Elijah replied. "Then another 4 to the trailhead. You won't make it out before dark, but once you're on the marked trail, you shouldn't have any trouble." We continued in silence for a while, the only sounds our footsteps and the rushing of the river beside us. The canyon walls seemed to be closing in, the path narrowing until we were walking single file along a ledge above the water. "Strange place for a cabin," I commented, trying to make conversation. "Pretty isolated. That's why I chose it," Elijah said without turning around. "After what happened in '83, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could be alone with my thoughts." "What happened in '83? He stopped walking so abruptly that I nearly ran into him. "My family died," he said, his voice flat. "My wife, Rebecca. My daughter, Emily." That name hit me like a physical blow. Emily, just like my ex-wife. "I'm sorry," I murmured. He nodded once, then continued walking. "Fire took them. I was away, working. Came home to ashes." We rounded a bend in the canyon and the path widened again. Ahead, I could see where the smaller stream we'd been following joined the larger middle fork of the Gila River. The junction was marked by a massive dead tree, its bleached limbs reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Elijah stopped beneath the tree. "Main trail's just up there," he said, pointing to a ridge above us. "Follow it northeast, and you'll hit the trailhead by tomorrow afternoon." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." The old man fixed me with those piercing blue eyes. "Listen to me carefully, Michael Williams. Don't stop until you reach the trailhead. Don't make camp in these canyons again. And whatever you do, if you hear someone call your name in the night, someone who sounds like someone you know, don't answer. Don't even acknowledge it." A wave of unease washed over me. "Why? What happens if I do?" "It learns more about you. Gets better at the imitation." He glanced at Rex, who had gone alert again, nose raised to the wind. "Trust your dog. He knows what's real and what isn't." With that cryptic warning, Elijah turned to leave. "Wait," I called after him. "What do I do if I encounter this walker?" He looked back over his shoulder. "Run, or shoot it. Not much else you can do." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Ironworks, too. Old Apache trick. They say it can't abide the touch of iron." Before I could ask anything else, he disappeared around the bend in the trail, leaving me alone with Rex and a growing sense of dread. The climb to the ridge was steep but manageable. Sure enough, at the top I found a well-marked trail with signs pointing toward the Middle Fork trailhead. According to the marker, we were 7 miles from our destination, too far to make it before nightfall, especially with the rough terrain ahead. I checked my watch, 3:15 p.m. We had maybe 4 hours of daylight left, enough to put some distance between us and this part of the canyon before setting up camp. We hiked at a brisk pace, Rex now leading the way along the clear trail. My relief at being back on course was tempered by Elijah's warnings, which I couldn't quite dismiss as the ramblings of an isolated old man, not after what I'd experienced. By sunset, we'd covered about 5 miles. The trail had taken us higher into the mountains, away from the river and into a dense pine forest. I found a small clearing with good visibility and reluctantly made camp. Despite my exhaustion, I kept the fire burning bright and settled Rex close to the tent entrance. "Just us tonight, buddy," I told him, scratching behind his ears. "We'll be back at the car tomorrow." I tried to sleep, but found myself listening to every sound in the darkness: the creak of branches, the rustle of wind through pine needles, the occasional hoot of an owl. Normal forest sounds, I told myself. Nothing to fear. It must have been around 2 a.m. when Rex's growl woke me. Low, threatening, it vibrated through the tent. I lay perfectly still, listening. Footsteps again. Circling, slow and deliberate, just like the night before. "Michael." The voice was different this time. Softer, feminine, familiar in a way that made my heart clench painfully. "Michael, please, help me." Emily's voice, exactly as I remembered it. Rex's growl deepened. I placed a hand on his back, feeling the tremors running through his body. "It's not real," I whispered to him. "Remember what Elijah said." The footsteps stopped outside the tent flap. "Michael, it's so cold out here. Please let me in." My hand moved unconsciously toward the zipper before I caught myself. Not real. Not Emily. She was back in Albuquerque, in our old house, probably with her new boyfriend. "Go away," I said firmly. "You're not real." A pause, then a chuckle that sounded nothing like Emily. A dry, rasping sound like dead leaves blowing across stone. "Clever boy," the voice said, dropping any pretense of being my ex-wife. "The old man's been talking, hasn't he? Telling tales out of school." I reached for my pack, feeling for anything made of iron. My hands closed around a small camping hatchet with an iron head. Not much, but better than nothing. "Did he tell you what happened to his precious Rebecca and Emily?" The voice continued conversationally. "Did he tell you how they screamed? How they called his name as the flames consumed them?" I gripped the hatchet tighter, my knuckles white. "Did he tell you it was his fault? That he left the lantern burning? That he smelled the smoke from a mile away and still couldn't reach them in time?" "Stop it," I hissed. "Or maybe he told you the other story. The one he tells himself so he can sleep at night. About El Caminante taking their forms, wearing their skins. So much easier than accepting the truth, isn't it?" I unzipped the tent flap just enough to peer out. In the faint moonlight filtering through the trees, I could make out a figure standing just beyond the dying embers of my fire. It looked human, the silhouette of a woman with long hair, but something about the proportions was wrong. The arms too long, the head tilted at an impossible angle. "What do you want?" I asked, the hatchet clutched in my sweating palm. "Company," it said simply. "It gets lonely in these woods." "Find someone else." The figure took a step closer. "But I chose you, Michael Williams, from the moment you entered my forest. So much pain in you. So much potential." Rex lunged forward, barking furiously. I barely managed to grab his collar before he charged out of the tent. The figure retreated a step. "Your dog won't save you. Nothing will." Its voice changed again, becoming Elijah's gravelly tone. "Should have listened better, son. Should have kept moving." With a speed that defied human capability, it darted forward toward the tent. I swung the hatchet blindly through the opening, feeling it connect with something solid. A shriek split the night. Not human, not animal, but something in between. A sound of pure rage and pain. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I grabbed my pack, clipped Rex's leash to his collar and burst from the tent, running headlong down the trail. The moonlight provided just enough illumination to keep us from stumbling over roots and rocks, but I knew we couldn't keep this pace for long in the dark. Behind us, I heard movement in the forest, crashing through underbrush, not even trying to be stealthy now. And that voice, calling after us, shifting between Emily's pleading tone and something ancient and malevolent. "You can't run forever, Michael. These are my woods, my mountains." We sprinted for what felt like miles, the sounds of pursuit sometimes fading, sometimes drawing terrifyingly close. Rex stayed at my side, no longer needing the leash to keep him close. Dawn was breaking by the time we stumbled onto a wider trail and, miracle of miracles, a wooden sign, Middle Fork, Trailhead, 1 mile. Hope gave me a second wind. 1 mile. We could make it. The sky was lightening by the minute, and I'd always heard that creatures like El Caminante, if it even existed outside my fear-addled imagination, were less powerful in daylight. The final mile was the longest of my life. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle in the undergrowth made me flinch. Rex no longer growled but whined continuously, pressing against my leg as we hurried along the trail. When we finally broke through the trees into the trailhead parking lot, I nearly wept with relief. My car sat where I'd left it 3 days ago, dusty but blessedly normal and real. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. As I opened the back door for Rex, I glanced back toward the forest. For just a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the tree line, tall and thin, with limbs that bent at odd angles. But when I blinked, it was gone. Just shadows and morning mist. The drive back to Albuquerque was a blur. I kept the radio on full volume to stay awake, stopping only for gas and coffee. Rex slept in the back seat, occasionally twitching and whimpering in his dreams. By late afternoon, we pulled into my driveway, both of us exhausted but alive. That night, safely back in my own bed, I finally looked up Elijah Blackwood online. There wasn't much, a few old newspaper articles from the Silver City Press. One from September 1983 caught my eye. Local man loses family in tragic cabin fire. The grainy photo showed a younger version of the man I'd met, his face hollow with grief as he stood before the charred remains of a small cabin. According to the article, Elijah had been hunting when the fire started. By the time he returned, his wife Rebecca and 5-year-old daughter Emily were already gone. The fire marshal suspected a knocked-over lantern, but the investigation was inconclusive. The final paragraph mentioned that Elijah had disappeared shortly after the funeral, telling neighbors he was going to live in the Gila wilderness. Most assumed he couldn't bear to be around people after his loss. I closed my laptop, my mind racing. Had I really met Elijah Blackwood? Or had it been El Caminante all along, wearing the old man's form like it had worn Emily's voice? Was the creature real? Or just the manifestation of a forest that had claimed too many lives, become too steeped in tragedy and fear? I don't have answers, even now, months later. I haven't returned to the Gila wilderness, though the mountains still call to me in my dreams. Sometimes I wake in the night to the sound of footsteps circling my house. Rex always hears them too, standing alert at the bedroom door, hackles raised. I keep the hatchet beside my bed, just in case, and I've installed iron thresholds beneath every door and window, an old Apache trick, Elijah had said. Whether monster or man or memory, some things are best left in the wilderness, in those mist-shrouded canyons where the boundaries between worlds grow thin with the turning of seasons. But sometimes, on the darkest nights, I wonder if the wilderness has followed me home. My name is Michael Williams, and I am 34 years old. This happened in the Gila National Forest of New Mexico, where the pines stretch endlessly into mist-shrouded mountains, and cell service disappears like smoke in the wind. I never should have gone hiking alone. Everyone tells you not to, but after Emily left, taking half our friends in the divorce, I needed solitude, space to breathe away from sympathetic glances and awkward conversations. 3 days in the wilderness seemed like the perfect reset. Just me, my German Shepherd Rex, and miles of unspoiled backcountry. The Gila wilderness was my choice because it felt like the edge of the world. Over 500,000 acres of rugged forest, with deep canyons and ancient cliff dwellings scattered throughout. I'd planned a route along the Middle Fork Trail, heading toward Jordan Hot Springs, challenging enough to exhaust my body so my mind could rest, but nothing beyond my capabilities as an experienced hiker. The first day went perfectly. Rex bounded ahead on the trail, his tail wagging with excitement at each new smell. The late September weather was ideal. Warm days, cool nights, and the aspens just beginning to turn golden. We covered 12 miles before setting up camp in a small clearing near a creek. I fell asleep to the gentle babble of water over stones and Rex's steady breathing beside my tent. The trouble started on our second day. I woke to a strange silence. No birdsong, no insects buzzing, just the whisper of wind through pine needles. Even Rex seemed unsettled, pacing the perimeter of our campsite with his ears flattened against his head. "What's up, buddy?" I reached out to scratch behind his ears, but he flinched away, something he'd never done before. His eyes were fixed on the dense forest beyond our clearing. I chalked it up to wildlife. Maybe a bear or mountain lion had passed nearby during the night. After a quick breakfast, we broke camp and continued along the trail, planning to reach Jordan Hot Springs by mid-afternoon. The path narrowed as we climbed higher into the mountains, weaving through stands of ponderosa pines and across small streams. I checked my GPS occasionally, marking our progress. Around noon, the device started acting strangely, the screen flickering, coordinates jumping erratically before settling again. "Technology," I muttered, tapping the screen. "Always fails when you need it most." That's when I noticed Rex had stopped walking. He stood rigid on the trail ahead, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Rex, what is it?" I followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual, just more trees, rocks, the typical wilderness scenery. I whistled for him to continue, but he refused to move. "Come on, boy, we need to keep going." When he still wouldn't budge, I clipped his leash to his collar and gently tugged. He reluctantly followed, but kept looking back over his shoulder every few steps. By early afternoon, we reached a fork in the trail not marked on my map. The GPS was no help, showing us in a completely different location than we should have been. I pulled out my paper map and compass, trying to triangulate our position using the peaks around us. Something wasn't right. According to my calculations, we should be heading southwest, but the compass needle swung wildly, spinning in complete circles before stopping at random points. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm afternoon sun. I'd been hiking these mountains for years and had never experienced anything like this. I decided to trust my instincts and take the path that seemed to lead downhill, toward what I hoped was the middle fork of the Gila River. The trail became fainter as we descended, eventually disappearing altogether among fallen logs and dense underbrush. I checked my watch, 3:42 p.m. We had maybe 4 hours of daylight left. Enough time to find the river and make camp even if we were off course. "We'll be fine," I told Rex, trying to convince myself as much as him. "We've got food and water for 5 days." We pushed through the undergrowth for another hour before I heard it, the blessed sound of running water. Relief flooded through me as we emerged from the trees onto the rocky bank of a wide stream. But my relief quickly turned to confusion. This wasn't the middle fork. The water ran clear and shallow over smooth stones, nothing like the deeper, faster-flowing river we should have encountered. I pulled out my map again, scrutinizing every contour line and blue squiggle. There was no stream marked in this area, at least not on my map. Unease crawled up my spine like a centipede. "We must have gone farther off course than I thought," I said aloud, trying to keep panic at bay. Rex whined and pawed at the ground. He needed water, and so did I. We'd been hiking for hours in the afternoon heat. "Okay, new plan. We'll follow this stream downhill. It has to connect to the river eventually." I filled our water bottles, added purification tablets, and let Rex drink his fill. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, we followed the stream through a narrow canyon. The walls rose higher on either side, casting long shadows across the water. I began looking for a suitable campsite, somewhere flat and sheltered from the wind. Around a bend in the canyon, I spotted what looked like an ideal location. a sandy bank beneath an overhanging rock ledge. As we approached, I noticed something odd. A circle of stones with the remains of a campfire in the center. Recent, by the look of the ashes. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No answer, just the echo of my voice bouncing off the canyon walls. Rex sniffed around the fire pit, then suddenly backed away, growling. "What is it? Someone's old camp, buddy. Nothing to worry about." But as I set down my pack and examined the site more closely, I understood Rex's unease. The fire circle contained partially burned bones, small, delicate bones that looked disturbingly human. Finger bones. My heart hammered against my ribs. There had to be an explanation. Animal bones, perhaps, that just resembled human ones. I knelt for a closer look and froze when I spotted something else among the ashes. A small, charred piece of metal. I picked it up and wiped away the soot. A wedding ring. Not just any wedding ring. It was identical to the one I'd worn for 5 years before Emily asked for a divorce. Same pattern, same inscription inside. Forever and always. I dropped it like it had burned me. This was impossible. My ring was in a drawer back home. I hadn't brought it with me. "We're not staying here," I told Rex, shoving everything back into my pack with trembling hands. The sun was setting now, painting the canyon walls blood red. We needed to find another campsite quickly. I hurried along the stream, Rex trotting anxiously beside me, both of us eager to put distance between ourselves and that fire pit. A quarter-mile downstream, the canyon widened into a small valley. Massive ponderosa pines lined the banks, their branches creating natural shelters. I chose a spot beneath one of the largest trees and quickly set up camp as darkness fell. The temperature dropped rapidly, and I built a small fire, trying not to think about what I'd seen in the abandoned campsite. Rex refused to settle, pacing around our camp and occasionally staring into the darkness with a low growl. I'd never seen him so agitated. He was normally the calmest dog, unfazed by wildlife or strange surroundings. "It's okay," I said, more to myself than to him. "We'll head back tomorrow, first light." I heated water for my freeze-dried dinner, but found I had little appetite. The food tasted like ash in my mouth. After forcing down a few bites, I secured our food in a bear bag and hung it from a high branch away from our tent. Inside my sleeping bag, I tried to rationalize what had happened. The GPS malfunction could be explained by the rugged terrain or a low battery. The compass, maybe there were mineral deposits in the area affecting its accuracy. The ring and bones. I must have imagined the similarities. Stress and isolation can play tricks on the mind. I drifted into an uneasy sleep, waking frequently to Rex's whimpers and the strange sounds of the forest at night. Around midnight, I jolted awake to the dog's deep, threatening growl. He stood at the tent entrance, every muscle tense. "What is it?" I whispered, fumbling for my headlamp. Before I could turn it on, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling our campsite. Not the four-footed movement of an animal, but the distinct cadence of a human. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps stopped directly outside the tent. Rex's growl deepened, the hair along his spine standing straight up. Then came a sound that froze the blood in my veins, a low, rasping voice. "Michael." No one had called my name. It was the wind, I told myself. Just the wind rustling the tent fabric. Michael Williams. Definitely not the wind. Someone, or something, knew my name. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. No response. The footsteps resumed, circling again, then gradually fading into the distance. Rex stopped growling but remained alert, his body rigid against mine. I didn't sleep again that night. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the trees, I packed up camp with shaking hands. We needed to get back to civilization, now. But which way? We'd gone so far off course that I wasn't sure of the quickest route back to a trailhead. I decided to continue following the stream downhill, hoping it would eventually lead to the main river and, from there, to a trail I recognized. The morning was eerily still, a thick fog clinging to the ground and winding between the trees like ghostly fingers. Rex stayed close to my side as we hiked, no longer ranging ahead as he had on our first day. After an hour of walking, the stream widened and deepened, its current picking up speed. This looked more like the Middle Fork I remembered, which gave me hope that we were heading in the right direction. The fog began to lift as the sun rose higher, revealing the towering canyon walls around us. Around mid-morning, we came upon something unexpected, a small cabin nestled among the trees near the riverbank. It looked old but well-maintained, with smoke curling from a stone chimney. Relief washed over me. People meant help, directions, maybe even a ride back to my car. "Hello," I called as we approached. "Anyone home?" The wooden door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a deeply lined face and sharp blue eyes. He wore faded overalls and a flannel shirt, looking every bit the mountain hermit. "Don't get many visitors out this way," he said, his voice gravelly from disuse, "especially not this time of year." "I'm afraid I've gotten a bit lost," I admitted. "My GPS malfunctioned, and my compass isn't working right. I'm trying to get back to the Middle Fork trailhead." The old man squinted at me, then at Rex. "That's a mighty fine dog you got there. German Shepherd, right? Good breed, loyal." "Yes, he is. His name's Rex." "Rex," the man repeated, nodding slowly. "Good name for a good dog." He stepped back from the doorway. "Come on in. Name's Elijah Blackwood. Been living out here for nigh on 30 years. I hesitated, then followed him inside. The cabin was simple but comfortable. A wood stove in one corner, a rough-hewn table and chairs, shelves lined with canned goods and books. A rifle hung above the door. "Coffee?" Elijah offered, already pulling a battered pot from the stove. "That would be great, thanks." He poured 2 cups and set one before me. "So, how'd you end up this far off the trail? Middle Fork's a good 5 miles east of here." I explained our journey, leaving out the strange incidents with the fire pit and the voice in the night. No need to sound like a lunatic to the one person who might help us get back safely. Elijah listened, nodding occasionally. "Happening more often these days," he said when I finished. "Hikers getting turned around, ending up places they shouldn't be." "Is there something wrong with the trail markers?" "Ain't the markers," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "It's these woods. They change sometimes, move things around." I laughed nervously. "Woods can't move things around." Elijah didn't smile. "Maybe not the woods themselves, but what lives in them can." A chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of the coffee in my hands. "What do you mean, what lives in them?" The old man leaned forward, lowering his voice as if afraid of being overheard. "Folks around here call it El Caminante, the walker. Been stories about it long as anyone can remember. Ancestral Puebloans knew about it. So did the Apache, Spanish settlers too. Thing that walks these canyons looking for the lost." I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Every remote area had its local legends, its campfire stories designed to frighten tourists. "And what does this walker do when it finds someone who's lost?" I asked, humoring him. Elijah's eyes locked onto mine. "Depends. Sometimes it just watches. Sometimes it leads them in circles till they die of exposure. And sometimes—" He trailed off, glancing toward the window. "Sometimes it takes their form." "Their form?" "Like a skin, wears it while it hunts for the next one." Rex, who had been lying quietly at my feet, suddenly raised his head and growled at the window. I followed his gaze but saw nothing except trees and mist. "Your dog senses things," Elijah said. "Animals always do. They know when it's nearby." "Look, Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate the coffee and the conversation, but I really need to get back to the trailhead. Can you point me in the right direction?" He nodded slowly, seemingly unperturbed by my dismissal of his story. "I'll do better than that. I'll take you part of the way myself. Not safe for you to be wandering around here, especially not now." "Now? What's special about now? Fall equinox was just days ago. Boundary between worlds gets thin this time of year." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't believe in boundaries between worlds or creatures that stole people's forms, but something stopped me. The memory of that voice in the night, calling my name. The wedding ring in the ashes. "All right," I said. "I'd appreciate the guide." Elijah gathered a few supplies into an old backpack. Water, some jerky, a tarnished compass that looked ancient. He took the rifle down from above the door and checked that it was loaded before slinging it over his shoulder. "That necessary?" I asked, nodding toward the weapon. "Better to have it and not need it," he replied grimly. We set out around noon, Elijah leading the way along a faint game trail that paralleled the river. Rex seemed more relaxed now, occasionally ranging ahead to sniff at interesting smells. The old man moved with surprising agility, navigating the rocky terrain with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of it. "How far to the main trail?" I asked after we'd been walking for about an hour. "Couple more miles," Elijah replied. "Then another 4 to the trailhead. You won't make it out before dark, but once you're on the marked trail, you shouldn't have any trouble." We continued in silence for a while, the only sounds our footsteps and the rushing of the river beside us. The canyon walls seemed to be closing in, the path narrowing until we were walking single file along a ledge above the water. "Strange place for a cabin," I commented, trying to make conversation. "Pretty isolated. That's why I chose it," Elijah said without turning around. "After what happened in '83, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could be alone with my thoughts." "What happened in '83? He stopped walking so abruptly that I nearly ran into him. "My family died," he said, his voice flat. "My wife, Rebecca. My daughter, Emily." That name hit me like a physical blow. Emily, just like my ex-wife. "I'm sorry," I murmured. He nodded once, then continued walking. "Fire took them. I was away, working. Came home to ashes." We rounded a bend in the canyon and the path widened again. Ahead, I could see where the smaller stream we'd been following joined the larger middle fork of the Gila River. The junction was marked by a massive dead tree, its bleached limbs reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Elijah stopped beneath the tree. "Main trail's just up there," he said, pointing to a ridge above us. "Follow it northeast, and you'll hit the trailhead by tomorrow afternoon." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." The old man fixed me with those piercing blue eyes. "Listen to me carefully, Michael Williams. Don't stop until you reach the trailhead. Don't make camp in these canyons again. And whatever you do, if you hear someone call your name in the night, someone who sounds like someone you know, don't answer. Don't even acknowledge it." A wave of unease washed over me. "Why? What happens if I do?" "It learns more about you. Gets better at the imitation." He glanced at Rex, who had gone alert again, nose raised to the wind. "Trust your dog. He knows what's real and what isn't." With that cryptic warning, Elijah turned to leave. "Wait," I called after him. "What do I do if I encounter this walker?" He looked back over his shoulder. "Run, or shoot it. Not much else you can do." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Ironworks, too. Old Apache trick. They say it can't abide the touch of iron." Before I could ask anything else, he disappeared around the bend in the trail, leaving me alone with Rex and a growing sense of dread. The climb to the ridge was steep but manageable. Sure enough, at the top I found a well-marked trail with signs pointing toward the Middle Fork trailhead. According to the marker, we were 7 miles from our destination, too far to make it before nightfall, especially with the rough terrain ahead. I checked my watch, 3:15 p.m. We had maybe 4 hours of daylight left, enough to put some distance between us and this part of the canyon before setting up camp. We hiked at a brisk pace, Rex now leading the way along the clear trail. My relief at being back on course was tempered by Elijah's warnings, which I couldn't quite dismiss as the ramblings of an isolated old man, not after what I'd experienced. By sunset, we'd covered about 5 miles. The trail had taken us higher into the mountains, away from the river and into a dense pine forest. I found a small clearing with good visibility and reluctantly made camp. Despite my exhaustion, I kept the fire burning bright and settled Rex close to the tent entrance. "Just us tonight, buddy," I told him, scratching behind his ears. "We'll be back at the car tomorrow." I tried to sleep, but found myself listening to every sound in the darkness: the creak of branches, the rustle of wind through pine needles, the occasional hoot of an owl. Normal forest sounds, I told myself. Nothing to fear. It must have been around 2 a.m. when Rex's growl woke me. Low, threatening, it vibrated through the tent. I lay perfectly still, listening. Footsteps again. Circling, slow and deliberate, just like the night before. "Michael." The voice was different this time. Softer, feminine, familiar in a way that made my heart clench painfully. "Michael, please, help me." Emily's voice, exactly as I remembered it. Rex's growl deepened. I placed a hand on his back, feeling the tremors running through his body. "It's not real," I whispered to him. "Remember what Elijah said." The footsteps stopped outside the tent flap. "Michael, it's so cold out here. Please let me in." My hand moved unconsciously toward the zipper before I caught myself. Not real. Not Emily. She was back in Albuquerque, in our old house, probably with her new boyfriend. "Go away," I said firmly. "You're not real." A pause, then a chuckle that sounded nothing like Emily. A dry, rasping sound like dead leaves blowing across stone. "Clever boy," the voice said, dropping any pretense of being my ex-wife. "The old man's been talking, hasn't he? Telling tales out of school." I reached for my pack, feeling for anything made of iron. My hands closed around a small camping hatchet with an iron head. Not much, but better than nothing. "Did he tell you what happened to his precious Rebecca and Emily?" The voice continued conversationally. "Did he tell you how they screamed? How they called his name as the flames consumed them?" I gripped the hatchet tighter, my knuckles white. "Did he tell you it was his fault? That he left the lantern burning? That he smelled the smoke from a mile away and still couldn't reach them in time?" "Stop it," I hissed. "Or maybe he told you the other story, the one he tells himself so he can sleep at night, about El Caminante taking their forms, wearing their skins. So much easier than accepting the truth, isn't it?" I unzipped the tent flap just enough to peer out. In the faint moonlight filtering through the trees, I could make out a figure standing just beyond the dying embers of my fire. It looked human, the silhouette of a woman with long hair, but something about the proportions was wrong. The arms too long, the head tilted at an impossible angle. "What do you want?" I asked, the hatchet clutched in my sweating palm. "Company," it said simply. "It gets lonely in these woods." "Find someone else." The figure took a step closer. "But I chose you, Michael Williams, from the moment you entered my forest. So much pain in you. So much potential." Rex lunged forward, barking furiously. I barely managed to grab his collar before he charged out of the tent. The figure retreated a step. "Your dog won't save you. Nothing will." Its voice changed again, becoming Elijah's gravelly tone. "Should have listened better, son. Should have kept moving." With a speed that defied human capability, it darted forward toward the tent. I swung the hatchet blindly through the opening, feeling it connect with something solid. A shriek split the night. Not human, not animal, but something in between. A sound of pure rage and pain. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I grabbed my pack, clipped Rex's leash to his collar and burst from the tent, running headlong down the trail. The moonlight provided just enough illumination to keep us from stumbling over roots and rocks, but I knew we couldn't keep this pace for long in the dark. Behind us, I heard movement in the forest, crashing through underbrush. Not even trying to be stealthy now, And that voice, calling after us, shifting between Emily's pleading tone and something ancient and malevolent. "You can't run forever, Michael. These are my woods, my mountains." We sprinted for what felt like miles, the sounds of pursuit sometimes fading, sometimes drawing terrifyingly close. Rex stayed at my side, no longer needing the leash to keep him close. Dawn was breaking by the time we stumbled onto a wider trail and, miracle of miracles, a wooden sign, Middle Fork, Trailhead, 1 mile. Hope gave me a second wind. 1 mile. We could make it. The sky was lightening by the minute, and I'd always heard that creatures like El Caminante, if it even existed outside my fear-addled imagination, were less powerful in daylight. The final mile was the longest of my life. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustle in the undergrowth made me flinch. Rex no longer growled but whined continuously, pressing against my leg as we hurried along the trail. When we finally broke through the trees into the trailhead parking lot, I nearly wept with relief. My car sat where I'd left it 3 days ago, dusty but blessedly normal and real. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. As I opened the back door for Rex, I glanced back toward the forest. For just a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the tree line, tall and thin, with limbs that bent at odd angles. But when I blinked, it was gone. Just shadows and morning mist. The drive back to Albuquerque was a blur. I kept the radio on full volume to stay awake, stopping only for gas and coffee. Rex slept in the back seat, occasionally twitching and whimpering in his dreams. By late afternoon, we pulled into my driveway, both of us exhausted but alive. That night, safely back in my own bed, I finally looked up Elijah Blackwood online. There wasn't much, a few old newspaper articles from the Silver City Press. One from September 1983 caught my eye. Local man loses family in tragic cabin fire. The grainy photo showed a younger version of the man I'd met, his face hollow with grief as he stood before the charred remains of a small cabin. According to the article, Elijah had been hunting when the fire started. By the time he returned, his wife Rebecca and 5-year-old daughter Emily were already gone. The fire marshal suspected a knocked-over lantern, but the investigation was inconclusive. The final paragraph mentioned that Elijah had disappeared shortly after the funeral, telling neighbors he was going to live in the Gila wilderness. Most assumed he couldn't bear to be around people after his loss. I closed my laptop, my mind racing. Had I really met Elijah Blackwood? Or had it been El Caminante all along, wearing the old man's form like it had worn Emily's voice? Was the creature real? Or just the manifestation of a forest that had claimed too many lives, become too steeped in tragedy and fear? I don't have answers, even now, months later. I haven't returned to the Gila wilderness, though the mountains still call to me in my dreams. Sometimes I wake in the night to the sound of footsteps circling my house. Rex always hears them too, standing alert at the bedroom door, hackles raised. I keep the hatchet beside my bed, just in case, and I've installed iron thresholds beneath every door and window, an old Apache trick, Elijah had said. Whether monster or man or memory, some things are best left in the wilderness, in those mist-shrouded canyons where the boundaries between worlds grow thin with the turning of seasons. But sometimes, on the darkest nights, I wonder if the wilderness has followed me home.